Chapter 1403. After giving away the heavenly Dao durian, Wang Ling felt a lot more at ease. Whether Wang Zhen's knees were broken or not, it had nothing to do with him. This was what it meant by an eye for an eye. You had to pay for what you did sooner or later. On the other hand, Lotus Sun wanted to help An Wan look for a spirit sword. Through his superb and familiar screen peeping skills, Wang Ling already had some understanding. In fact, it could be said that he and Lotus Sun had the same idea. It had always been the Wang family's tradition to give a sword to a child at birth. Even if Lotus Sun hadn't prepared one, Wang Ling would have thought of a way to get a spirit sword for his little sister. Wang Ling didn't have high requirements for a spirit sword. For one thing, it had to be obedient to his little sister's wishes. For another, it had to be flexible. This was an additional condition based on the first point. The main point was that he hoped it wouldn't be blindly loyal. If An Wan did something wrong, it had to be stopped in time. So, to sum up, Wang Ling's requirements were actually very simple. As long as this sword could accompany his little sister as she grew up, help her with her homework when she ran into trouble with her studies, give her a massage when she was tired to relieve stress, protect her at the first instant when she was bullied, take her place when she needed someone to play games with her, Wang Ling listed all of these conditions neatly in the notebook. In his opinion, a spirit sword worthy of his little sister was the bare minimum. Sword master, apart from being strong in battle, I don't seem to have anything else. Staring at the conditions listed from beginning to end in the notebook, Jinka suddenly felt that he was a little useless. Wang Ling rubbed Jinka's white hair again to comfort him. For Wang Ling, Jinka's companionship from a young age was destined to be a part of his memories that he couldn't bear to part with. And his attitude toward Jinka was like that of an old father. It was fine as long as Jinka could stay with him in his old age. As for his studies, games, and battle strength, he was already strong enough, so Jinka just needed to act cute on one side. Jinka sighed. Although he said he was looking for a spirit sword, it felt more like he was looking for a confinement nanny. It was really too difficult to be a spirit sword nowadays. Not only did you have to be strong in battle, you also had to develop morally, intellectually, physically, and aesthetically. Most importantly, he had to learn how to do functions, and in a sense, functions were also a compulsory lesson for modern spirit swords. For example, when a spirit sword was attacking from a distance, one had to calculate the parabola accurately. Lotus Sun wanted to find a spirit sword for Wang Wan, but in reality, she was also doing some work for him. Moreover, a girl's thoughts might be more meticulous than his. Wang Ling felt that he might as well go with the flow and directly use this impromptu Sword Dao conference to look for spirit swords. Sword God Alloy, this thing is actually not worth much to you, right? At that moment, Loopy Toad's voice rang out behind him. Lord Ma had already sent it back. Running back and forth between the two villas wasn't easy for Loopy Toad. The competition over there was held at the last minute. Bai Qiao said that Sword King Realm has 0 Sword God alloy in stock. I'm afraid it's too late to mine and refine it again. So I wanted to ask if you have any ideas, Loopy Toad said. It was now just an errand boy. Sword God alloy actually existed in Wang Ling's treasure house. This was one of the rarest metals in the universe, and there was a very limited amount of it in the entire Sword King realm. Because it was extremely difficult to refine, it was very rare. And because it was rare, it was precious. A piece of alloy the size of a die was enough to upgrade a spirit sword once. And Wang Ling's King's Treasure Pants had a piece of this rare Sword God alloy the size of a small mountain. Furthermore, it was 100% pure without the slightest impurity. Using the great cutting spell, Wang Ling casually cut off a piece the size of a basketball and gave it to Loopy Toad. Loopy Toad was stunned. This piece of alloy the size of a die was already enough to upgrade a spirit sword. Directly giving it the size of a basketball, it would be enough for those spirit swords to smash themselves to pieces and remake them. Thus, when Bai Qiao and Loopy Toad went back to see Nine Nether with the basketball-sized piece of Sword God alloy, Nine Nether was completely stupefied. This, such a big lump? What happened to the rarest metal in the universe? Why was there such a big lump here? Furthermore, it was an extremely pure one. Nine Nether stretched out his hand to sense the purity of this piece of sword god alloy, and it was as if he had been struck by lightning again, 100% purity. Where did Lady Bai Qiao get this thing? His voice was trembling. Even as the current administrator of the Sword King world, Nine Nether still couldn't hide his excitement. Can I participate in this Sword Dao conference? Nine Nether's heart itched. With such a big piece of sword god alloy as a reward, the entire Sword King world might really go into an uproar, and countless spirit swords would fight to the death for this piece of sword god alloy. This is an exclusive collection, of course you don't know about it. Besides, I have no use for this kind of alloy at all. Bai Qiao shrugged. She and Jinka were both made of peach wood, and it would instead be a burden for them to reintegrate metal elements into their bodies. At the same time, Nine Nether also discovered a very mystical item. He realized that the spirit swords at the top didn't seem to be made of metal. Jinka and Bai Qiao were made of peach wood. Bamboo was the first. And the third-ranked spirit sword was an amber sword. None of the top three swords were made of metal, which instantly made Nine Nether feel like he had reincarnated into the wrong body. Just focus on this competition, and you'll get an extra reward after it's done. I still have some sword god alloy. Bai Qiao swept Nine Nether a glance and said, as for Carter, Wu Jin and Old Barbarian, they should be busy preparing for the competition, so you'll have to inform them on my behalf. Work hard, and you'll get plenty of rewards. This was actually Wang Ling's intention. Otherwise, Bai Qiao wouldn't have dared make this decision on her own. You had to give someone something in return for working overtime. There was a saying, as long as you paid enough overtime, it didn't matter if you had to work like an ox or a horse. With this kind of reward, Wang Ling believed that the Sword Dao conference this time would definitely go very smoothly. Don't worry, Lady Bai Qiao. We'll definitely do our best. Nine Nether bowed deeply to Bai Qiao. He himself was full of confidence in the preparations for the competition this time. The only thing to blame was the charm of the sword god alloy. Humans sucked in cats, and sword spirits sucked in iron. Any sword spirit wouldn't be able to resist sucking in the sword god alloy. Smells so good. Nine Nether held this basketball-sized piece of sword god alloy with an intoxicated expression. Is it that bad? Loopy Toad didn't understand. Give me an example. Bai Qiao said telepathically to Loopy Toad, Lord also has the same expression when he smells the pepper smell of crispy noodle snacks. Loopy Toad, I get it. Chapter 1404. With Bai Qiao's promise of a reward, Nine Nether was naturally full of enthusiasm. Although this Sword Dao conference had been an impromptu idea, it absolutely couldn't be done on a whim. It had to be grand enough to give the human girl a real experience. Secondly, the participating sword spirits couldn't be too strong. At the very least, spirit swords ranked higher than Mysterious Sea couldn't participate. These spirit swords would be directly assigned to the judges. In a quiet room in Sword King World's palace, Nine Nether started a meeting with Carter, Wu Jin and Old Man. Although time is tight, I think it's still necessary to make a selection so that the overall quality of the contestants this time is a little higher. Nine Nether bent over the table. Throughout the entire process, his hands never stopped moving as he continued to take notes on his notebook. This competition is actually a good opportunity. Because the ranking data of the sword ranking is automatically generated by the sword ranking, the ranking also changes in real time according to the condition of the spirit sword. Therefore, there have always been many sword spirits who have doubts about the ranking of the sword ranking. Lord Nine Nether, what you mean is that we can take advantage of this opportunity to predetermine Miss Sun's victory, and also let the sword spirits verify the authenticity of the sword list? Old Man said as he stroked his beard. Old Man, you're right, but you have to remember, you can't be so frank outside. Nine Nether smiled bitterly. This Sword Dao conference was indeed specially held for Lotus Sun, and if everything went as expected, she would be the predetermined champion. After all, this girl was Lady Bai Qiao's disciple. But this was something that could only be understood and not expressed in words. It was better to keep it strictly confidential. This was the routine of a so-called variety show. It wasn't unusual for a predetermined champion to be predetermined. If you wanted to make an artist popular with the power of capital, apart from giving them enough topics to talk about, you had to give them a champion package at the very least. At present, the sword list only calculates the top 100,000 sword spirits. I don't think there's a need for the nameless sword spirits after that to participate, Nine Nether said. But there are still too many sword spirits on the list. The ideal situation for our competition this time is 1,000 sword spirits. So, we still have to go through the audition. Lord Nine Nether, what do you think? To ensure that the sword spirits at every stage can participate, my current idea is to divide them into 5 little ancestors: bronze, silver, gold, diamond and king. Then, each group will decide 200 winners, Nine Nether said. The others immediately understood Nine Nether's meaning. Among the sword spirits on the list of 100,000, there were only a few of them. According to this classification, among the 100,000 sword spirits, sword spirit number 1 and sword spirit number 19999 were the champions. Diamond groups 20,000 to 39,999, so on and so forth. The 100,000 sword spirits would be divided into groups, and then each group would go through a certain selection method to select 200 victors. In this way, it could guarantee that there would be sword spirits selected from each level, and they would all be sword spirits with higher overall qualities. Of course, this was how the teams were divided. It was the sword spirits' choice to participate in the competition or not. If they didn't sign up, it would be regarded as an automatic forfeit. Therefore, when it came to the audition stage, each group might not have a full 20,000 people. For example, the champion division would lose many strong competitors. After all, those who were ranked ahead of Mysterious Sea had all gone to be judges, so now, it was just a hypothetical situation. If every group was full, how would they divide them into groups and auditions? What about Miss Sun during the audition? Miss Sun doesn't need to participate in the audition. There are so many people anyway, and they won't be able to see her. When the time comes, I'll just advance directly. Finally, each group will decide on 200 people. That's not a bad idea. But I still feel that it's not fair. Even the last in the champion division can beat bronze, right? Wu Jin asked. My idea is, why don't we just decide on a few more champions? After the 200 sword spirits in each group are divided, the 200 sword spirits will fight until the champion is decided. And the champion of each group will get a reward. Nine Nether was very thoughtful. This way, we can avoid some gossip. But the prize for the champion of each group is not Sword God Alloy, but a chance to use the Imperial Sword of Protection. Imperial Sword. Imperial Sword of Protection. Wu Jin and Old Barbarian's mouths twitched. It's a full-body recuperation for the sword body. Little Qian and I will apply the lubricant. That's sick. Even Carter couldn't stand it anymore. Sigh, you guys are underestimating the allure of the Imperial Sword of Protection project. I don't know how many sword spirits would be fighting over this project. Nine Nether sighed. He gestured with his hand as he applied the lubricant, looking very professional. According to Nine Nether's current train of thought, once the champions of each group were decided, each would get a chance to use the Imperial Sword of Protection. This was the basic reward. As for the true grand prize, which was the Sword God Alloy, it would be born after the battle royale of the 5 groups. If nothing unexpected happened, Lotus Sun and Mysterious Sea would definitely win it. But now, there was a problem in front of everyone. What kind of selection method should they use to reduce the number of people in each group from 20,000 to 200? First of all, a battle royale wasn't practical. When there were too many sword spirits, it would be hard to control the situation. When the time came, all 20,000 sword spirits would turn into beams of sword light and fly around in the sky, just like fireworks. Just looking at it would make one dizzy. Should we set up a special voting area for the sword ranking and let the sword spirits perform? Let all the sword spirits hold a public vote, and the sword ranking sword spirits can cast 2 votes. Wu Jin suggested. Nine Nether immediately rejected this proposal. We're not idle sword trainee. What's the point of a sword spirit performing? And an open voting system isn't good for Miss Sunday, that's true. Wu Jin nodded. Carter had wanted to raise her hand to make a proposal. She had an idea for Creation 202, but after seeing Wu Jin's rejection, she silently put down her hand. It seems that everyone is frowning. So now, there's only one way left. Nine Nether stopped taking notes and rested his chin on his fingers. In fact, this method was very old, but it was very suitable in this situation. That method you mentioned, don't tell me. Seeing Nine Nether's old-fashioned movements, Wu Jin already had an idea. It seems that there's really only one way. It's the least chaotic and also the fairest method. Old Barbarian had also thought of it. So what method is it? Carter still didn't understand. Carter, your reaction is too slow. Nine Nether smiled profoundly, and then instructed little Chien outside the door, go make a public announcement and tell all the sword spirits who are interested in participating to gather in Sword God Square. Sword God Square. It was only now that Carter finally understood. It turned out that this ancient method was to use the ancient sword steel and Sword God Square to test the power of the sword chi. Looks like you've finally thought of it, Carter. Old Barbarian snorted. The older generation of sword spirits have all done the sword steel test. Back then, when I slashed with my sword power was at level 9. Chapter 1405. Because of the Sword Dao meet, the sword spirits of the entire Sword King realm were mobilized. This was a grand event that was rarely seen in 100 years, and the most important thing was that the reward was such a large pile of Sword God alloy. All the sword spirits couldn't help but rub their palms together. As the saying goes, the most important thing is to participate, and it would definitely not be a loss to participate. Moreover, Nine Nether's reward system was actually quite good in this regard. The final prize was the Sword God alloy. The first place of each group would have a chance to obtain the Royal Palace's Great Protection Sword, and all the participants in the qualifiers would receive an additional piece of low-purity Sword God alloy. This was a very small piece that Nine Nether had cut from the Great Sword God alloy. After being cut by 1,000 people, each piece was only the size of a BB bullet, and the purity was concentrated to 5%. A concentration of 5% meant that the success rate of fusion would be around 5%. Therefore, the low-purity Sword God alloy was nicknamed the Lucky Stone by many sword spirits. To the Lucky Stone, even if the success rate was only 5%, it was no different from 100%. Therefore, even such a small piece of low-purity alloy was enough to make the sword spirits fight over it. That night, there was a long queue in front of the Sword God Plaza. Countless sword spirits rushed over as soon as they received the notice. Carter and Xiao Qian were in charge of on-site supervision and statistical work. Old Barbarian and Limitless were in charge of maintaining order. In addition to controlling the field, the two men would also participate in the group stage. It wasn't to compete with Lotus Sun for a spot, but to ensure that she would advance. They would eliminate as many people as possible in the free-for-all phase of the 200-person competition. Then, if they lost to Lotus Sun in the end, the girl would be guaranteed first place in the group. That's right, this competition was so social and dark, funny. In any case, they were ranked below Mysterious Sea, so it was not unreasonable for them to be eliminated. As for the Nine Nether, he went to look for the remaining judges. Given that Bai Qiao, Jinka, and you weren't participating in the judging panel, there were currently the following confirmed judges. Ranked 5th, himself, Nine Nether, number 6, Xiao Qian, Toothpick Sword. However, it was not enough for the two of them to be the judges. Hence, Nine Nether's current job was to pull Yu Ling, who was ranked 3rd, and Mou, who was ranked 4th. Nine Nether knew the whereabouts of these two girls. Originally, Nine Nether had intended to look for Wind, who was ranked 7th. But it was a pity that Suifeng was just like his name, drifting with the wind. Never knowing where he was. Drifting Wind was a feather sword. Its entire body was covered with feathers, and it looked very light. As it swung, it could emit scorching phoenix flames. However, the phoenix fire had healing abilities, so it also had a powerful healing effect. Even damaged organs could be repaired by the phoenix fire. To be able to give the target being healed a feeling of pain and happiness, in the Sword King realm, in the Sword God forest, in front of a 10,000-meter waterfall. A young girl with her hair tied up in a bun was sitting quietly under the waterfall. She was wearing a pink cheongsam with a very high slit on the side. She was sitting cross-legged with a pair of slender, white legs. There was a layer of light pink invisible sword barrier surrounding the girl. The waterfall above her head fell on the sword barrier, but it was cut by the sword chi. The water bounced and splashed in all directions. This was the bone-burying waterfall in the Sword God forest. It was a good place for cultivation, but normal sword spirits didn't dare to approach it. Like the name of the waterfall, if the sword chi wasn't strong enough, it would probably be crushed by the huge water pressure of the waterfall. Yu Ling, I knew you would be here. Nine Nether stood in front of the waterfall, and her voice was transmitted into the girl's eyes through the roar of the waterfall. Yu Ling opened her eyes, revealing her gem-like pink eyes. The Sword Dao conference was your idea? Seems like you're very well informed. Nine Nether smiled with her hands behind her back. Mou was originally with me, but she went immediately after hearing it. She's more enthusiastic than I thought. Heh, she's obviously a jade sword, but she's not gentle at all. She's so impatient. Yu Ling lowered her eyelids. But being a judge doesn't suit me. You found the wrong person. Isn't there still wind? I don't know where he is. Nine Nether shook his head. Actually, if she really wanted to find him, she could always find him. But time was pressing, and there wasn't much time left before the Sword Dao conference. It was already too late to find Wind now. It seems that he's still trying to locate his sword master. Yu Ling looked up at the starry sky in the distance. Finding a suitable sword master was in fact every sword spirit's long-cherished wish. In fact, the top 50 sword spirits on the sword list all had the ability to travel through the blade storm on their own. They could have gone out a long time ago, but because they couldn't find a suitable master, they had been cooped up in the Sword King world, waiting for the right time. It was like a strategist living in seclusion deep in the mountains. I'm afraid it won't be easy for Wind to find his sword master. Nine Nether smiled bitterly. His phoenix fire has a healing effect, and the person being burned is in pain and happiness. Even if he can find a sword master in the end, he'll be a masochist, said Yu Ling, maybe. Nine Nether smiled and continued with the previous topic. Are you sure you won't be a judge? Among the participants this time, that human girl is Lady Bai Qiao's disciple, and she won't be participating in the selection to avoid arousing suspicion. Furthermore, she named you as a judge. In fact, Bai Qiao hadn't said anything like that. She had only given Nine Nether the right to act at his own discretion. As long as he could ensure that the Sword Dao competition this time went smoothly, Nine Nether could use Bai Qiao's name at will to do things. At that moment, Yu Ling finally raised her head, and there was a pleasantly surprised expression on her originally serious little face, as if someone had fed her a candy. She really asked me to go? Yes. Nine Nether nodded affirmatively. As Bai Qiao's #1 fan, Nine Nether expected that Yu Ling would definitely be pleasantly surprised when she heard the news. It was just that he didn't expect the girl to be even more excited than he had imagined. Then, what about Lord Jinka? Yu Ling asked in a voice as pleasant as spring water. Lord Jinka won't be back, but Lady Bai Qiao said that they'll be quietly watching the battle from a distance, said Nine Nether. Great. I'll be a judge. Yu Ling immediately agreed. Nine Nether looked pleased with himself. Girls nowadays were so easy to fool, but the names of Lord Bai Qiao and Lord Jinka were indeed useful. At the same time, on the other side of the sword square, the sword steel trials were still going on. Sword Spirit Ku Xian, Level 4 Sword Power. Total Value, 404. Fail. Carter lowered his head as he recorded the results. Next. When he raised his head again, a boy with a buzz cut suddenly appeared in front of him. The boy looked a little childish and was just a little taller than the registration table. Wearing rattan armor, he looked at Carter expressionlessly. "My name is Ling Ming. Where did this little sword spirit come from?" Little Qian frowned. He looked like a sword spirit that had just been born. She stared at the little boy in front of her and felt that his spirit power was pitifully low. "It's actually a sword formed from a blade of grass." Carter saw through the little sword spirit's true colors. She carefully flipped through the information on the sword list. In the end, she was astonished to find that this little sword spirit called Ling Ming in front of her was stuck at 20,000 on the sword list. "What do we do now?" asked little Qian. "Let him have a try. His name is on the sword list." "He's young, but he can still participate," said Carter. Chapter 1406. "Thank you," Ling Ming replied politely. He had a smile on his face, but he looked nervous. "Don't be nervous. Do well. Just wait behind that yellow-haired brother," little Qian said softly as she took notes, and then gave Ling Ming his number plate. Carter and little Qian were very patient. After all, this was a newborn sword spirit, and as seniors, they had to take care of him. Most importantly, the child in front of them was a very likable and cute little guy. Although they weren't optimistic about Ling Ming's final test results, Ling Ming had entered the sword list not long after he was born, so he would definitely be someone worth looking forward to in the future. Transformed from a blade of grass. Interesting. Carter and little Qian waited expectantly for Ling Ming to show up. At the same time, Carter's imagination ran wild. Transformed from a blade of grass. What kind of blade of grass could awaken in this way? Had Ling Jinren peed on it when it wasn't paying attention back then? At that moment, a lot of sword spirits were talking about Ling Ming's appearance in Sword God Square. They had thought that he was the child of some great sword spirit, but in the end, he had actually been born independently in the Sword King world, and had actually come to register. He's at the bottom of the sword list at birth. How lucky. I wonder how much combat strength he can produce. Dao ancestor Wang personally set up the sword steel back then, and can test a person's combat strength, talent, and potential in all aspects, so combat strength is only one part of the overall score. The sword list's ranking is also based on combat strength. Comparatively speaking, the sword steel's overall evaluation is more objective. A sword spirit said as he looked at the huge sword steel in front of him. This sword steel was more than 3,000 zhang tall, but it was broken in its entirety. In the history of the sword list, this kind of fracture had only happened once. That was when Jinka had just been born. As soon as Jinka was born, he cut off half of the sword steel with one sword strike, and a large chunk of the originally 20,000 zhang sword steel was cut off and turned to dust on the spot by sword chi. Back then, Jinka had been invincible, number one in terms of combat strength, talent, and potential. It had alarmed the entire Sword King world. But such a miracle probably wouldn't happen a second time. The sword list was ranked according to combat strength, and it was already a given that Ling Ming's combat strength wouldn't be too high. The miracle of the sword steel breaking would never happen a second time. Therefore, the crux of the matter now was his talent and potential value. At this moment, all eyes were on the square. The sword steel stood tall in front of him, and all sorts of sword spirits surrounded it. Some were queuing up, while others came over to watch the fun after hearing the news. Most of the sword spirits were humanoid in shape, and there were also beast-shaped sword spirits. After Ling Ming received his number, he confirmed that he was behind a yellow-haired youth. The youth glanced at Ling Ming in disdain. "Little sword spirit, watch Big Brother perform for you." As he spoke, he walked towards the sword steel while his entire body emanated lightning, and a powerful strand of sword energy emanated from his body. "I remember him," he shouted. Lightning crackled. 100,000 volts of electricity. "It's him. I remember him." Many sword spirits began to whisper to each other. The moment they saw the burst of lightning, they realized that the yellow-haired man was Raiden, and the young man's lightning was his true form. Currently, Den Ming was ranked 286th on the combat power leaderboard. He was one of the experts in the challenger group. He had the habit of reading books. In the Sword King realm, there were also many young sword spirits who relied on selling their words to earn money and buy materials to upgrade their swords. In order to rush for updates, Jianming often went forward to shock those unscrupulous authors who delayed or stopped updating. Therefore, he had such a fearsome reputation. Jianming was very confident in his test results. He released his sword energy and slashed forward. Boom! In an instant, golden lightning shot in all directions, and the sound of thunder rumbled. The surging sword energy rushed forward and transformed into a lightning tiger that pounced on the sword steel. Then, the lightning tiger formed by the lightning sword energy merged into the sword steel and quickly disappeared. Jianming was very confident in his attack. He had used all his strength, and he believed that the result would not be too bad. At the very least, it would not be a problem for him to enter the top 200 out of the 20,000 people in the challenger group. As long as his overall score was slightly higher, he would be able to enter the top 100. How was it, little brother? How was Big Brother's move just now? After the test, Jianming glanced at Lang Ming and smiled proudly. Soon, a string of ancient characters appeared on the sword steel. Carter glanced at it and reported the result while registering it. Jianming, level 216 sword energy, total value, 21600, pass. Current challenger group ranking, 162nd. This result could be said to be no surprise. With Jianming's level, the probability of him being selected was extremely high. After all, the evaluation of the sword steel was not purely based on combat strength. However, Jianming was still somewhat dissatisfied with the current ranking. He thought that he could at least enter the top 120. But now, it seemed that the sword steel's ranking was slightly lower because there were many other sword spirits in the challenger group who had not participated in the test. If he continued to encounter experts in the future, he would definitely be done for. Even so, in Jianming's opinion, at least he was not considered bad in the eyes of others. Especially in front of this little sword spirit. Little brother, it's your turn. Jianming glanced at the dumbfounded Lang Ming and then retreated to the side. Lang Ming stepped forward and faced the sword steel. His face was flushed, and he finally hammered it with his small fists. The sword steel did not respond. Everyone burst into laughter. Little brother, your normal attacks are useless. You have to be like the big brother from before and use your own sword energy to slash at the sword steel. A kind-hearted person reminded him. Carter held her forehead and patiently stepped forward. She pressed on the area below Lang Ming's navel. You have to use your chi from here, understand? When the sword energy comes up, release it from your fingers with all your might. Okay, Lang Ming's face was flushed. He was anxious and shy. He did not expect to make a fool of himself as soon as he appeared. He composed himself and then followed Carter's instructions. Finally, a glowing green sword energy that looked like a small flame was nurtured in his palm. This sword energy. Does it really have combat strength? Many people stared at the scene in front of them and did not know whether to laugh or cry. Perhaps such a weak sword energy could only be used to light a cigarette? Indeed, in terms of combat strength, Lang Ming was still lacking. At this moment, the boy carefully protected the small wisp of sword energy that he had nurtured. That trace of glowing green sword energy had just touched the sword steel when it instantly sank into it. The sword steel was still unmoved. Many people had been looking forward to Lang Ming's performance, but it seemed that he had disappointed them. As expected, it still doesn't work. Hey, what can a newborn little sword spirit do? Sure enough, he's just lucky to be able to make it to the end of the sword list. However, just a few seconds after these people finished speaking, the entire sword steel actually started to shake violently. In that instant, a dazzling golden light burst out of the sword steel and resonated with the entire Sword King world. The sword energy that had been like a spark instantly turned into sword pressure that set a prairie ablaze, drowning out the whole of Sword God Square. This unusual phenomenon shocked everyone present. What the hell is going on? Almost all the sword spirits in the Sword King world, whether they were in Sword God Square or not, looked up at the sky and sensed the power coming from the sword steel. When the sword spirits in Sword God Square clearly saw the number displayed on the sword steel, they were all shocked. My God! 100,000. First in the bronze group. It's not just the bronze group. This number is unparalleled even in the king group. Not bad, not bad. At that moment, in the Wang family's small villa on Earth, Jinka sensed the strong fluctuations coming from Sword God Square. He was a good seedling. Wang Ling nodded. He had also sensed it. A lot of sword spirits had now gathered in Sword God Square, which had piqued his curiosity a long time ago. Thus, he had familiarized himself with the God view to spy on them. By the way, how much did you hit back then? Loopy Toad looked at Jinka curiously at that moment. Not much. Jinka shook his head and said modestly, just 1 billion. 1 billion, and you even broke the sword steel? Loopy Toad's mouth twitched. I just, casually, scratched it once. Jinka said, I didn't expect it to be so big. Loopy Toad. Chapter 1407. It's really not bad. Wang Ling couldn't help muttering as he gazed at the unprecedented scene in Sword King world. It was hard to imagine that this man would actually open his mouth for a newborn sword spirit. So, Sword Master wants to give him to Anwan? Jinka asked. To be honest, it wasn't that he didn't have this thought. The little sword spirit had great potential. If he nurtured her well, she would definitely be a great talent. Furthermore, Nwan had just been born. There were still a few years before she could start school. Although the little sword spirit was still a blank piece of paper, with enough potential and talent, she should be able to be nurtured in a few years. This was just a conservative estimate. Based on Lang Ming's overall aptitude, he wouldn't even need a few years. Or rather, he wouldn't even need a year. Perhaps he would only need a few months to learn all the knowledge of the human world before Anwan went to university. He would also be able to cultivate Anwan into an outstanding combat sword spirit. As the saying goes, it's better to be prepared. He had his eyes on Lang Ming, who was currently a blank piece of paper. He could keep him as a spare tire and slowly nurture him. During the Sword Dao meet, Lotus Sun could still find another one based on her own ideas. What if Lang Ming's talent was focused on fighting and he wasn't good at studying? Therefore, it was better to find a spiritual sword that knew how to learn and loved to learn. No one stipulated that a person could only have one spirit sword. In Jianghu, having more swords won't burden you. It was not illegal to bind multiple spiritual swords at the same time. After making up his mind, he stared at Jinka and said telepathically, take him in. Jinka, me? You don't have any disciples yet, right? Wang Ling looked at Jinka and asked telepathically. Jinka, to be honest, he had never thought of accepting a disciple. But this was Wang Ling's idea. As the sword spirit, of course he would follow his master's wishes. He was confident that he could teach Ling Nether well. But when it came to studying, it might not be so easy. The main thing was that Jinka himself hadn't studied much. He had never formally attended any classes either. He had learned everything from watching Wang Ling do his homework on the side. If Wang Ling gave it his all, he could get 100 points. He could probably only get 90 points. There was still a huge gap between them. That's enough. Wang Ling looked at Jinka. He knew exactly what Jinka was thinking. This was Jian Xingzhong's first time being a Shifu, and furthermore, it was Wang Ling who had appointed him, so Jinka couldn't help feeling a little nervous. Really, is that okay? You're my sword, no problem. Wang Ling stroked Jinka's white fur again and said with a serious expression. Encouraged, Jinka took a deep breath and agreed. Okay. I'll take him in. At the same time, everyone in the vicinity of the Sword God Plaza was exclaiming in surprise. They were inexplicably shocked as they looked at the number that appeared on the sword steel in front of them. Those sword spirits who had yet to join in the fun and were rushing towards the sword god square from afar also stopped in their tracks. Over there, immortal light shone resplendently. The sword steel's unusual movements caused the entire sky of the Sword King realm to be dyed with 7 colors. These people had yet to see clearly what exactly was happening at the scene. They only felt shocked. Which sword spirit is it? Why haven't I felt this sword chi before? It's said to be a newly born little sword spirit, but a little sword spirit can actually cause the sword steel to resonate like this? Many of the sword spirits' eyes stung. The light in the sword god square in front of them was too dazzling, too blazing, and unimaginable. When they got closer, they saw Lang Ming standing in front of the sword steel in a daze, and they were even more dumbfounded. It really is a little sword spirit, transformed from a blade of grass? Many of the sword spirits were shocked and smiled bitterly. Each non-metal sword was more powerful than the last. Metal swords really had no way out. In that instant, Carter could feel a strong sour smell in the air, as if many of the people here had turned into lemon people. She could subconsciously sense that among the spectating sword spirits, many of them had turned their jealousy into hostility towards Lang Ming. Without thinking, Carter immediately rushed forward to protect Lang Ming. She grabbed Lang Ming's hand and took him away from the scene without saying a word. Quiet. Keep quiet. Wuji and Old Barbarian cooperated very well, and they immediately maintained order at the scene. In the Sword King realm, it was common to bully little sword spirits who had just been born. Whether it was humans or sword spirits, they would all be jealous. Lang Ming's aptitude was obvious, and many sword spirits already wanted to kill him. If they could capture Lang Ming and use the evil array to forcefully devour him, it would also be a way for sword spirits to improve themselves. However, such a method was seen as evil, and it was not recognized by the Sword King realm. However, Lang Ming's results in this test were too dazzling. It was necessary to be wary of others, and there would definitely be sword spirits who would be willing to do that. You guys can protect him now, but can you protect him forever? Someone stood up and was unconvinced. To many people, Lang Ming was just a little sword spirit, a nameless blade of grass. Now that this blade of grass was emitting light, many sword spirits were instantly filled with jealousy, and they almost had a mental breakdown. He clearly did not have enough battle power, but in this sword steel test, he was ranked first in the bronze rank. This test result even surpassed many people in the king group. Impossible. How could this be? There must be something wrong with the sword steel. Electric Cry felt as if he had been slapped hard in the face. Previously, he had put on airs in front of Lang Ming, and everyone had seen it. Now that he was beaten by Lang Ming, Electric Cry felt that he had lost face. Whoever wants to fight, feel free to try, Carter said coldly. Her death lotus was already stirring. Her gaze deterred many sword spirits. At the same time, a white and flawless sword light descended from the sky. The person who had arrived was Mo Yu, one of Yu Ling's best friends, who had rushed over after receiving the news. Mo Yu wore a white short skirt, had long black hair, and wore a jade crown on her head. She was beautiful, and her whole body exuded a sweet fragrance. You are not allowed to fight in the sword capital royal city. Anyone who dares to do so will bear the consequences. The young girl saw everything from afar, and after landing, she also started to intimidate others. The judges of the competition were the most interesting. You are not allowed to fight in the sword capital, but there will be a time when you can't protect him. At that moment, Electric Cry snorted and vented all his anger at losing face on Lang Ming. Kid, your battle power is not good enough. There will be a time when these people can't protect you. Just you wait. As soon as he said that, a streak of brown sword chi came from the horizon, like a meteorite. It directly pierced through the sword storm in the Sword King world and stabbed towards Sword God Square. It was just a trace of sword chi, but its power was unimaginably great. In an instant, it turned into a bolt of divine punishment that accurately struck Electric Cry. Electric Cry directly vomited blood from the sword pressure brought by this sword chi, and his whole body sank deep into the ground, leaving only his head exposed. Everyone was shocked. Such powerful sword chi that was invincible in the world. There was only one person in the Sword King world who could do this. It's Lord Jinka. Sword Master has made a move. This actually alarmed Sword Master, Leng Ming. It's my disciple. Very quickly, Jinka's voice rang out throughout the Sword King world, shaking the hearts of all the sword spirits. Anyone who dares to make an enemy will bear the consequences. Chapter 1408. The King of Sword Spirits had personally come out. This had alarmed the entire Sword King world. This was something that none of the sword spirits could have imagined. A newborn little sword spirit was actually chosen by the King of Swords as his disciple. In Sword God Square, countless sword spirits were dumbfounded. Their emotions were unsettled, and they knew that they might be witnessing history. Has the King of Swords ever accepted a disciple? No. This little sword spirit called Leng Ming is the first. He actually accepted a disciple publicly. My youth is over. Many sword spirits sighed emotionally. As a newborn little sword spirit, Leng Ming had been chosen by the King of Sword Spirits with his extremely high aptitude and had been accepted as a disciple. Maybe Jianming was right, Carter, Wu Jin, and the others couldn't protect Leng Ming. There would always be times when Leng Ming wasn't around. But now, the boss of the entire Sword King world had appeared and publicly accepted this little sword spirit as his disciple. If anyone dared to provoke him again, Jianming would be smashed into the ground by the sword and bleeding from his 7 orifices. This was both a deterrent and a warning. For a moment, the sword spirits in Sword Saint Square who had been hostile to Leng Ming out of jealousy put away their thoughts. This little sword spirit's starting point was different. The King of Sword Spirits was often away from the Sword King world, so the sword spirits had never found an opportunity to curry favor with Jinka. Now that Leng Ming had become Jinka's disciple, he naturally became the first person to curry favor with. Sword Spirit Square instantly became lively, and many sword spirits with reputations in the Sword King world stepped forward to offer benefits to Leng Ming. Little brother, I run a royal sword spirit bath center. Come here to take a bath. Tell me my name is Qiao Shan. No charge. Little brother Leng Ming, we run a medical center. Chin Sung Medical Center. If you're not feeling well, uncle will come and examine you. Go away, don't lead children astray. Come. Little Leng Ming, big sister runs a tutoring organization. If you need a teacher, you can look for big sister anytime. For a moment, the scene went out of control because of Leng Ming's little interlude. Fortunately, Jinka's fate gave Carter, Wu Jin, and Old Barbarian clear instructions, and they were now even clearer about their attitude toward Leng Ming. The chaotic scene lasted for more than 10 minutes. It wasn't until Nine Nether and Yuling flew across the sky that the noisy square regained its peace. A man and a woman descended from the sky, looking like a perfect couple. It's Lord Abysmal and Lord Yuling. They're here too. I heard that Lord Abysmal specially went to find Lord Yuling to be a judge this time. All along, many people had mistakenly believed that there was a relationship between 9 underworlds and imperial spirits. Nine Nether was also very helpless about this. He really wanted to, but Yuling only had Jinka and Bai Qiao on her mind. For example, when he heard that Bai Qiao was inviting him to be a judge, he had come without a second word. After all, he was the sword spirit who was ranked 3rd on the sword ranking. There was no need for him to give face to the person ranked 5th. Sigh, being 1 rank higher on the leaderboard is crushing me to death. On the way to the plaza, Nine Nether smiled bitterly in her heart. Yuling rarely appeared in places with many people. Facing the unprecedentedly grand scene of the Sword God Plaza, she felt a little uncomfortable. However, it could be seen that she was still trying hard to adjust her emotions. Yuling waved her hand and supported her waist with one hand. Her figure was graceful, revealing her perfect curves. Everyone, please take care of me. I am also one of the judges for this sword principal meet. Her sweet voice swept through the entire Sword God Plaza, causing many male sword spirits to let their imaginations run wild. Just the sound alone was unbearable. Lady Yuling is so beautiful. Like a fairy walking out of a painting. That's right. Lord Yuling's voice was just as pleasant to the ears as Lord Mo's. The contestants this time are in luck. Ozol. With Lord Yuling joining us, I believe that the competition will be fair and just. Following the appearance of Yuling. At this point, the judges for the Sword Dao competition were also finalized. They were ranked 3,456th on the sword ranking. According to the order of the sword ranking, they were Yuling Mou, 9 Nether, Xiao Qian. Be quiet, everyone. Sword God Plaza, do not make any noise. At this moment, 9 Nether hissed in a low voice, and it immediately took effect. Although she was only a manager, 9 Nether still had the dignity of a manager. Thereafter, under the suppression of 9 Nether and the others, the scene regained its order. Everything was proceeding in an orderly manner. 9 Nether estimated that the 5 groups, with a total of 1,000 people, would all be settled by tomorrow. Then, he just had to wait for the girl to participate in the competition the day after tomorrow. It could be said that everything was ready except for the east wind, December 8th, Tuesday. Lotus Sun had a sleepless night. Girls were always worried about their skin, so even Lotus Sun had a habit of going to bed early. However, the girl had thoroughly experienced the pain of tossing and turning in bed last night. Her mind was full of Jiang Yingying. At the same time, she was constantly speculating about this girl's background, personality, hobbies, and so on, because of Lotus Sun's extraordinary imagination and ability to fill in the blanks. While she was thinking about Jiang Yingying, she directly used Jiang Yingying's point of view to create a girl romance of more than 100,000 words. The more she thought about it, the more complicated and bizarre it became, and the more she thought about it, the more she fell into insomnia. When she got up, Lotus Sun looked in the mirror and heaved a long sigh of relief when she found that she didn't have dark circles under her eyes. Damn, she's a cultivator, after all. Some people can go several years without sleeping and be fine. Didn't Rongrong just stay up one night? She won't have dark circles under her eyes. Sun Yinger comforted her. She had witnessed the girl setting a new record for rolling on the bed last night. Rolling back and forth on the large bed that was dozens of meters long, she felt like she had finished a marathon in the morning. Worried that her complexion wasn't good, the girl looked in the mirror as soon as she woke up. However, as a shadow, Sun Yinger's focus wasn't on the girl's face at all, but on the girl's chest in front of the mirror with a face full of worry. Rongrong, if you can't sleep in the future, try not to roll around, Sun Yinger suggested earnestly. Lotus Sun? Sun Yinger, it's not big to begin with, what if it's rubbed flat? Lotus Sun clenched her fists angrily, wishing she could sew Sun Yinger's mouth shut. That morning, Wang Ling walked straight in from the school gate. He didn't dare take the convenient transmission array again, mainly because he was worried that he would blow it up again. When he arrived at the classroom, Wang Ling found that Hero Gua and Super Chen were already sitting there. These two clowns had most likely gotten up early in the morning to copy each other's homework. Wang Ling, have you heard? Something happened to Wang Zhen next door. Hero Gua took the initiative to talk to Wang Ling. Wang Ling pretended to be calm. It seems to have something to do with that strange bunch of people who showed up at the door earlier. They said they were actors, but I think they were gangsters. Hero Gua said mysteriously, I heard that it was those gangsters who broke Wang Zhen's knees. Hearing this, Wang Ling couldn't help sighing. That was why people sometimes couldn't be too confident in their knees. How hard was the heavenly Dao durian that he had enchanted? Whoever knelt would know. Chapter 1409. Wang Zhen looked like he had run out of luck. But the truth was that Wang Zhen had only decided to kneel on the durian after careful consideration. Of course he knew that this heavenly Dao durian wasn't ordinary. It was an existence that Wang Ling had enlightened, and wouldn't shatter under his knees like an ordinary durian. If he knelt, his kneecap might shatter. Thus, before kneeling on the heavenly Dao durian, Wang Zhen had a very clear understanding of the situation. But in the end, he still chose to kneel. Because at the same time, Wang Zhen was well aware. If his knees were shattered, Wang Ling's anger would dissipate. Compared with breaking his knees, offending Wang Ling was far scarier than Wang Zhen had imagined. So, kneel if you want. In any case, cultivation medical technology was so advanced that even if it was broken, it could be repaired without leaving any sequelae. As long as Wang Ling's anger could be appeased, everything would be worth it. And it turned out that Wang Zhen's decision was completely correct. As for the fact that his knees had been beaten up by gangsters, this matter was completely unfounded. He didn't know how it had gotten out. Logically speaking, Lu Qingyi was the only one who knew about his injury. Lu Qingyi had actually covered it up very tightly, so no one else should have known. Unless he had accidentally let the news slip out, but even if it had, it shouldn't have been so outrageous. Wang Zhen couldn't help sighing with emotion. This was the way things were on the internet nowadays. People who followed the crowd on the bandwagon often ignored the truth of the matter itself. Because what they really cared about wasn't the truth, but what they believed to be right. It was really scary to not have the ability to think independently nowadays. Elsewhere, Lotus Sun held a special student union meeting to discuss the vicious incident of Wang Zhen being suspected of being attacked by gangsters in front of the school gates. Lu Qingyi and Lotus Sun had in fact accidentally let it slip during their conversation about Wang Zhen's incident. Then, as the driving force behind the scenes, eldest Miss Sun had made it up. She wanted to hold a student union meeting to find out more about Jiang Yingying. Since there was a meeting, there had to be a reason. Wang Zhen's incident was actually the perfect excuse for the meeting. Who told Wang Zhen to be so mischievous? But after all, this was also using Wang Zhen. Lotus Sun had prepared some tonics for the couple's hotel where Wang Zhen was currently staying. There were all kinds of medicines that could treat bones, kidney deficiency. At 12:30 in the afternoon, it was originally the lunch break for each class. At this point, Lotus Sun called for a student council meeting. The student council was unable to punish the so-called underworld. However, as an organization that provided services to students, they could propose to the school to strengthen the security at the school gate during the dismissal period. Before all the participants started the meeting. Everyone thought it would be a serious meeting. In the end, when Lotus Sun suddenly asked for a person's name, everyone was baffled. Does everyone know this girl, Jiang Yingying? Lotus Sun smiled calmly. Everyone was stunned. Wait a minute, weren't we supposed to be discussing the issue of strengthening the security at the school gate after school? Why did he suddenly change the topic to a girl? All the representatives of number 60 High's elite class were stupefied. President, is this girl related to this incident? Someone asked. No, I'm not sure yet. Lotus Sun said, I just heard some rumors, so I wanted to ask if everyone knows this girl so that I can sort out the information and verify whether it's true or not. The girl's serious expression made it sound like she was telling the truth, and the naive members of the student council instantly believed her. As expected of the president. As expected of classmate Lotus Sun, she's serious and rigorous. Someone couldn't help praising her on the spot. At the meeting, a lot of people were whispering to each other and talking animatedly. Basically, those who were willing to join the student council were social beauties who were active in various school circles, and more or less had some connections in other schools. After Lotus Sun asked this question, these people immediately took out their phones to ask their friends who they were familiar with. With so many people around, someone really did ask about Jiang Yingying. I got it. A girl with short hair raised her hand. Jiang Yingying, a girl from Sword God Academy. She also participated in the 9 Dragon Mountain National Body Technique competition before, but was eliminated very early on. Sword God Academy? Lotus Sun frowned slightly. Everyone knew that Sword God Academy was a school that Blade Master General Yi had invested in, and that his adopted son, Yi Jiang, was studying there. Loopy Toad had previously speculated that Jiang Yingying might be related to Battle Saint Marshal Jiang. Then, if Jiang Yingying was also studying here, then this could almost be considered a solid piece of evidence. So she was a student from Sword God Academy? Lotus Sun was pleasantly surprised by this new discovery. In this way, the clues to the incident and the relationship between the characters were all connected, Lotus Sun was almost certain that this was the Jiang Yingying she was looking for. "Do you have a photo?" Lotus Sun asked. "Yes." The short-haired girl pulled out Jiang Yingying's photo, which someone had just sent her. The person who had sent her the information was a boy from Sword God Academy, who was also a member of the student council. "This person looks a little like you, President." The girl swiped her hand across the air, and the photo on her phone was projected into the air in the conference room. When everyone saw Jiang Yingying's face clearly, they couldn't help gasping. You can't say they look particularly alike, but at first glance, they look a little alike. That's so cool. I still think our president is good-looking." Lotus Sun gazed at this face that looked a lot like her own, and at the same time, she was thinking of countermeasures. Looking at the information she had so far, Jiang Yingying was pretty much what she had speculated. Basically, the fact that she had been able to participate in the 9 Dragon Mountain National Body Technique competition was already enough to prove that Jiang Yingying's grades at Sword God Academy were pretty good. It was just that she had been a little unlucky during the competition and had been eliminated very early on, which was why Lotus Sun hadn't noticed her. So, did she fall in love with classmate Wang Ling during the 9 Dragon Mountain National Body Technique competition? Lotus Sun wondered. After the student council meeting, Lotus Sun spent the afternoon thinking about how to approach Jiang Yingying. It would be very unnatural if she came knocking on her door abruptly. However, what the girl never expected was that something unexpected would happen again just as school was about to end. Lotus Sun was called into Headmaster Chen's office. "Student Lotus Sun, you're the president of the student council. Our school will soon have a new batch of transfer students. I hope you can take the lead and get these students to integrate into our school environment as soon as possible." "Very well, Headmaster, I'll do my best." Lotus Sun nodded. Student Sun is excellent, there won't be any problems." Headmaster Chen smiled as he handed her a booklet. "This is the list, take a look." Lotus Sun opened the booklet. The name of the first person on the list immediately caught her attention. It wasn't anyone else. It was none other than Sword God Academy's Jiang Yingying. In a flash, a sense of crisis welled up in Lotus Sun's heart. Chapter 14:10. Preemptive Strike. This was something Lotus Sun hadn't expected. Sword God Academy wasn't bad since it had been established with General Yi's investment. Although it hadn't been long since it opened, it was a famous key city high school with a strong faculty. A lot of rich people couldn't get in even if they wanted to, but Jiang Yingying had chosen to give up and come to number 60 high. Her goal was very clear, she was here for Wang Ling. Looking at the list, Lotus Sun's mood was very complicated. It said that this batch of transfer students would be enrolled by next Monday at the latest. That was to say, she had no idea when Jiang Yingying would be coming. So now, she only knew one thing. She had to be ready at all times. It could be said that Jiang Yingying's move had affected everything. Around the time number 60 high students were out of school, Loopy Toad specially went to Wei Ji's apartment to find out more about Jiang Yingying. It wasn't that Loopy Toad wanted to know the situation, the point was that Lotus Sun had promised it benefits. Now that Loopy Toad had decided to live in the human world, it had to think about its future. And life was nothing more than work, find a partner, get married, and have a son and a daughter or something, but here was the problem. Loopy Toad's assets in the human world were limited. And now, finding a partner was actually a very real problem. For example, between a handsome pauper and an ugly tycoon, most people were more inclined to the material world. After all, as long as you had money, no matter how ugly you were, you could change your appearance. Besides, Loopy Toad didn't think its human form was ugly. It just lacked certain assets. So now, helping Big Miss Sun work and doing some groceries was undoubtedly the best way to make money. When Loopy Toad came to look for Wei Ji, Gu Xuanji was still at number 60 high, and only Zhao Qingxian was helping Wei Ji. Fatty Zhao Qingxian had already switched back to his original body with Fan Xing, and now looked a lot more peaceful. But Loopy Toad felt that this was probably the calm before the storm. Who knew what this guy was thinking? he wouldn't give up on Lu Qingyi so easily. Thus, the biggest beneficiary of the Yang Shuangji incident that Baizhi had transformed into was actually Fan Xing. This guy had already been a cripple, but because of the body swap, his injuries had inadvertently healed. You want to ask about Jiang Yingying? Wei Ji was a little surprised by Loopy Toad's question. He habitually grabbed the brim of his cap and turned it clockwise, revealing his smooth forehead. Then, he handed the shower head in his hand to Zhao Qingxian. Right now, they were cultivating spirit plants in a modified greenhouse. These spirit plants were used to make special fertilizers that could help spirit beasts grow better. After handing over his work to Zhao Qingxian, Wei Ji led Loopy Toad to the tea room next door. He closed the door and then activated the soundproof array. Although he didn't think Zhao Qingxian would eavesdrop, Jiang Yingying's problem was a private matter. Wei Ji felt it was safer to do it this way. Is this necessary? Loopy Toad couldn't help laughing. Why did you suddenly want to ask about Miss Yingying? Wei Ji was also curious. He poured Loopy Toad a cup of tea to understand its true thoughts. Isn't this girl going to transfer to number 60 high soon? I was asked by someone to come and find out more. Loopy Toad gave Wei Ji a meaningful look. Did Miss Sun ask you to come? Wei Ji instantly understood the purpose of Loopy Toad's trip. It could only be said that he was, in the end, one of Loopy Toad's best friends in the human world. There were times when a pair of tacit friends only needed one look to guess what it meant. Then can you tell me? If it's not convenient for you, I'll think of something else. I won't force you, Loopy Toad said. After all, the person asking might be the granddaughter of one of the 10 generals, so Loopy Toad understood that it wasn't convenient for Wei Ji to say more. I've already activated the soundproof array. Of course I want to tell you. But what I know is very limited. Wei Ji smiled and flipped through the photo album under the tea table. There was a photo of Wei Ji and a girl who looked somewhat similar to Lotus Sunday. The girl was holding a large orange-yellow spirit bird and smiling very happily. This is Miss Yingying. This was Loopy Toad's first time seeing a photo of Jiang Yingying. If it hadn't taken a closer look, it would have almost thought it was Lotus Sunday. But after careful observation, Loopy Toad felt that the differences were very obvious. First of all, Jiang Yingying had short hair and a mole on the tip of her nose. Maybe it was because of the photo, but her skin wasn't as fair as Lotus Sun's. So Loopy Toad concluded, Boss is still the best looking. You work for Boss Lotus Sun, your salary must be very high, right? Wei Ji gossiped. Not high, not high. I only got 100,000 yuan for one piece of information. I'll remember to send you a red packet when I get my salary. Wei Ji sighed. When all was said and done, she was the young miss of a rich family. Money was too easy to earn. Miss Yingying is indeed Uncle Zhang's granddaughter, but she's not his biological daughter. She was adopted when she was very young, said Wei Ji. Adopted again? Loopy Toad's mouth twitched. What was wrong with the 10 generals? They just liked to raise children. But it wasn't that Loopy Toad couldn't understand. When a cultivator's cultivation reached a high enough level, there would always be some abstinent cultivators. In layman's terms, they had been single for too long and were used to it. How did the saying go? Being single is great, being single is always great. Since they didn't want to marry a wife and wanted to raise a child to inherit their legacy, adoption was the most convenient method. Very few people know about this, and Uncle Jiang didn't tell anyone. As for how I found out, I actually discovered it by accident, said Wei Ji. But he didn't say exactly how he had discovered this relationship. Uncle Jiang regards Miss Yingying as his own. If anything happens to her spirit beast, he basically sends it to me for treatment. All in all, Miss Yingying is a very gentle and quiet girl with an air of literature. A literary girl? More or less. Wei Ji nodded. Hearing this, Loopy Toad suddenly had a bold guess. Since this Miss Jiang Yingying liked literature, then was there another possibility? She actually wasn't attracted to little Master Ling, it had to be noted that during the National Body Technique competition on Nine Dragon Mountain, when Little Master Ling and Wang Ying had been playing with meteorites in space, it had been Crispy Noodles Dao Monarch who had stood in for him. Furthermore, while he had been the substitute, he had completed an astonishing essay with full marks. Chapter 14:11. Is there anything else of value? No matter how small it is, Loopy Toad asked. It wasn't very happy. Sure enough, getting information from Wei Ji was the right thing to do. Together, there were already hundreds of thousands of yuan in the account. But this wasn't enough for a down payment on a property. Nowadays, housing prices were ridiculously high. It could only be saved for the time being and accumulated bit by bit. Even if Loopy Toad invested it, it would still be very risky. After all, it was possible to lose money investing in oil nowadays, so nothing was impossible. Let me think. Wei Ji rubbed his chin and thought hard. After a moment, he had an idea. Ah, that's right, have you heard of gray powder? What's that? Loopy Toad didn't understand. Gray powder? A fan of the gray fog creature? But Gray Fog Lord's groundhog was still being suppressed under the water tower in Battle's Sect Central Lake. Because of the pain of losing its balls, Loopy Toad was still petrified and hadn't come back to its senses yet. I just heard about it. When I was chatting with Miss Ying last time, she casually mentioned that she joined a gray sect and became a gray powder, Wei Ji said. It's not some evil religion, is it? After all, with Marshal Jiang around, it's unlikely to be a cult. It's probably some kind of fan club. Wei Ji replied. Miss Ying also said that everyone in the gray sect is a speck of ash in the times. At that moment, Loopy Toad finally understood. A speck of ash in the times was a famous scene that would last forever. This essay from the Nine Dragons Mountain Conclave was still in the National Middle School Student Essay Library, and was about to be published as a book as one of the essays in the National Selection of Outstanding Essays. Student Wang Ling, who had been mistaken for the original author, was about to receive a one-time payment of around 3,000 yuan for this reason. But since this was also using his ability to make money, Father Wang had directly contacted the publishing firm and asked them to donate the money in Wang Ling's name. So from what Wei Ji had learned, Loopy Toad suddenly felt that Wang Ling was a little pitiful. If Jiang Ying really took a fancy to Crispy Noodles Dao Monarch, what would happen then? After doing her homework that night, Lotus Sun kept thinking about Jiang Ying. Sun Yinger comforted her. Rongrong, don't think too much. Maybe he was here to learn. Also, I don't think you need to worry at all. Ling Zhenren is a block of wood that you can't move. How could Jiang Ying get her way so easily? She thought this would comfort Lotus Sun, but in the end, it only made her feel worse. Yes. If only Wang Ling wasn't a blockhead. At that moment, the phone on the table vibrated as Lotus Sun received a message from Loopy Toad. It was full of information on Jiang Ying that Loopy Toad had obtained from Wei Ji, as well as Loopy Toad's speculations about this matter. So, the person classmate Jiang Ying might actually like is Senior Crispy Noodles Dao Monarch? Lotus Sun stared at the message, and her initially gloomy mood seemed to ease up quite a bit. But Loopy Toad's speculation alone didn't seem to prove anything. After all, from Jiang Ying's subjective point of view, she didn't know that Wang Ling wasn't the real author of the essay at the Nine Dragon Mountain National Body Technique competition. So what Lotus Sun had to do now was sort out these misunderstandings. The girl originally thought that this was just an ordinary competitor. Unexpectedly, the situation was far more complicated than she had imagined. There's no other way. It looks like we can only infiltrate the enemy's ranks and gain a deeper understanding of the situation, Lotus Sun muttered with a frown after thinking for a while. Rongrong wants to join that gray sect? That's the only way now. Lotus Sun nodded. But this matter couldn't be rushed for the time being. For Lotus Sun, she still had the task of replacing the Heavenly Dao magic cube. At around 8:00 in the evening, Loopy Toad appeared at the door of Lotus Sun's bedroom on time. The girl was ready. The fourth magic cube was located in another universe secret land called the Ageless Star. Are you ready, boss? Loopy Toad asked. You've worked hard on today's information, Loopy Toad. The money will be in tomorrow. Lotus Sun smiled. Let's make it quick. I have more important things to do when I come back. She was already very familiar with the process of replacing the magic cube. As long as the magic cube didn't go berserk, there was almost no risk in collecting the magic cube as long as she brought Mysterious Sea with her. And after this trip back, Mysterious Sea had reached the standard of 4 cores. The first core was Alluring Sword, the second core was Alluring Sword, the third core was Alluring Sword, and the fourth core was Alluring Sword Plus. With 3 cores, Mysterious Sea could already destroy the Earth, and with 4 cores, he could destroy a planet that was 100 times larger than the Earth. At the same time, in a Xian Xing apartment building 100 kilometers away from Lotus Sun's house, there were satellite monitors everywhere. After a flurry of signals, the image finally froze on the villa where Lotus Sun lived. 2 technicians adjusted the satellite image. Young Master, there was a brief fluctuation in the signal just now, but it's normal now. Behind them, a handsome young man in a suit and leather shoes leaned back in a wide leather recliner. His feet were crossed on the table as he frowned slightly. When on earth will the heavenly eye be able to see into my little sister's bedroom? The owner of this Xian Xing apartment building was none other than Fan Xing. He was the building owner. The entire apartment building was his territory. Ever since he had recovered, he had been pondering a plan for revenge. During this period of time, the pain he had suffered in the Sun family villa. Every time Fan Xing thought about it, he would feel depressed and unable to get rid of it. It was as if there was a blood clot in his heart. But it seemed he wasn't fated to die. Although he didn't know what was going on, in a very short period of time, his body had completely recovered and reached the level of a normal person's health. Even the doctor who had treated him had said that this might be a miracle in the history of cultivation medicine. Young Master, for some reason, there's always a very strong magnetic field in Miss Sun's bedroom. Maybe old Master Sun has sent an expert to protect her? That's also why our satellite signals have been unable to penetrate it. Expert? How strong? I'm well aware of the strength of the expert in my little sister's villa. The heavenly eye I set up can easily spy on even soul formation cultivators. Fan Xing said. His original intention had been to secretly take some private photos of Lotus Sun and then spread them online. But now it seemed that this path wasn't going smoothly. Logically speaking, Lotus Sun was only at the foundation establishment stage, and this was in her bedroom, so how could there be an expert lurking in a girl's bedroom? Could it be that his little sister had become a true immortal expert in a few days? That didn't make sense. Forget it, let's just carry out the original plan. Fan Xing sighed and waved his hand. Yes, young master. The technicians nodded, and they began to remotely mobilize the heavenly eye. Fan Xing's heavenly eye satellite also had the ability to summon meteorites. It could use scientific means to absorb nearby meteorites, and then twist the meteorite's intelligence to a specific orbit to accurately strike the target. That was right. His goal was to blow up the entire Sun family villa and then destroy Lotus Sun along with it. Chapter 14:12. Before she left, she vaguely sensed that something wasn't right. The girl raised her head and stared at the night sky. For some reason, she had a vague feeling that there was a murderous aura coming from beyond the heavens. But she wasn't sure, and thought it was just her imagination. In fact, Sun Yinger and Loopy Toad had also sensed it. After leveling up to a divine beast, Loopy Toad could sense the power of chaos scattered throughout the universe. This power of chaos had become Loopy Toad's other major sensory organ, making it particularly sensitive to malice. At the same time, as the Lord of the Void and Lotus Sun's personal female bodyguard, Sun Yinger still had the most basic awareness of defense. Do you sense a faint murderous aura? Loopy Toad asked the girl at that moment. Lotus Sun nodded. Don't doubt yourself, your judgment isn't wrong. Loopy Toad frowned. In the passive, one with the sword, state, the sword chi emitted by Mysterious Sea was like an amplification device installed on the girl's body, greatly enhancing her ability to predict danger. Why do I feel like it's coming from space? Lotus Sun felt it. She stared at a spot in the sky where the heavenly eye was. It seems to be a satellite that's trying to launch an attack on this place, said Loopy Toad. Satellite? The girl was surprised. There weren't many offensive satellites nowadays that were used as weapons. The Heavenly Justice E-Bomb, developed by Huaxiao Nation's Cultivation and Magic Treasure Research Institute, was in fact still a destructive attack weapon launched from a satellite. Every country in the world strictly controlled weapons satellites, and even Huaguo Water Curtain Group didn't have the right to launch one. Loopy Toad exhaled into the air, and the weapons satellite that was trying to launch an attack on Lotus Sun's house in space was projected into the air like a mirage. Looking at the scale of the weapon, I can basically tell that it's a private satellite. Lotus Sun frowned. Huaguo Water Curtain Group had once launched artificial illumination satellites into space for the cultivation of spirit plants, so the girl had in fact done some research on the classification of satellites. A national weapons satellite was a huge object with a clear flag symbol on it, while a private satellite was a blank slate. I never thought that there would actually be someone who wants your life now. Loopy Toad couldn't help sighing. No matter who was behind it, it was morning for the culprit. Not everyone could be provoked. What's more, the person he was provoking now was the strongest Foundation establishment cultivator on Earth. Forget it, I don't care who it is. Retrieving the Rubik's Cube is more important now, and I have more important things to do when I come back. Lotus Sun extracted one of Mysterious Sea's clones from his sword spirit space and left him here to oversee the villa. She didn't take this target seriously at all. Then let's go. Loopy Toad felt that the girl's way of doing things had become increasingly mature. A few seconds later, they followed Lord Ma's golden teleportation light to the universe mystic realm Immortal Star to retrieve the fourth cube. The doppelganger, Mysterious Sea, stayed here alone in the empty room. His sapphire-like eyes were a bit empty. The breeze outside the window blew his curly hair, and his silver-gray hair fluttered gently like waves. Xianxing Apartments. Everything was ready. The Heavenly Eye had finished absorbing the meteorite. With just one order, they could launch a precise attack on Lotus Sun's villa. Do it, Fan Xing gave his final order. There was a loud bang. The Heavenly Eye's mechanical thrusters abruptly pushed the meteorite into orbit according to the calculations. In an instant, the meteorite shot out and fell into the atmosphere, then rubbed against each other to generate tremendous energy. For a moment, the sky split open and rapidly spread forward. A terrifying burst of energy. Fan Xing had secretly gathered a lot of civilian scientists to discuss and design this Heavenly Eye, and he had commissioned a craftsman to personally build it. For this, he had paid a huge price. At the same time, this was Fan Xing's first time using the Heavenly Eye. Master Shouchong really didn't lie to me, the Heavenly Eye is indeed powerful enough. It's so easy to use. Fan Xing stared at the image transmitted back from the monitor, feeling very happy. He felt that he had really found the right person, and that Master Shouchong, he had praised, was the true name of this civilian craftsman. This craftsman was called Shouchong. Young master, everything is working normally now. The Heavenly Eye has calculated that the meteorite is already in position and can accurately land on top of the villa, said a technician. At the same time, he was also very curious about this craftsman that Fan Xing had found. Where on earth did you find him, young master? I met him by chance. I saw him pacing back and forth at the entrance of the Academy of Sciences, and he was stopped by the security guards at the entrance every time. Out of curiosity, I went to ask about the situation. In the end, I didn't expect to accidentally find such a talent. I invested a lot of money into him, and now many of his inventions are in the testing stage. Soon, I will be able to apply for a patent. Fan Xing smiled. If I can put them into mass production and go on the market in the future, the technology empire that I establish might not be any worse than Huaguo Water Curtain Group. In the past 2 years, due to the excessive mining of spirit herbs, the market price of spirit herbs kept rising. As the cost of pills increased, the price naturally increased as well. This directly caused people who could not afford to buy pills to be even more unable to afford them, and those who could afford to buy pills felt that it was not worth it. It was no secret that Huagua Water Curtain Group's pill industry had been incurring losses year after year, and it had been going downhill for the past 2 years. In Fan Xing's view, this was the era of technology to prosper the country. And he had unearthed a talent like Shouchong, which undoubtedly injected a shot of adrenaline into his technology company. Currently, Fan Xing had invested as much as billions in Shouchong. And Shouchong did not disappoint, and he had already invented many magical high-tech products. Fan Xing said proudly, "The 180-degree all-around handstand automatic shampoo will go on the market soon. As long as you put your head in, it will automatically wash and dry your head in 30 seconds. The technician, Fan Xing, and you may not know this, but this apartment building is actually also a high-tech, cutting-edge product invented by Shouchong." "The apartment building too?" "That's right." Fan Xing nodded. "This apartment building is explosion-proof and earthquake-proof, and it also has an automatic warning system. When the AI system of the apartment determines that the apartment suffers a destructive blow that it can't withstand, it will automatically activate the emergency evacuation system." At this moment, before Fan Xing could finish, the technician in front suddenly screamed, "Not good, young master." "HM? What's going on?" Fan Xing frowned. "The meteorite we launched originally landed precisely in the direction of the Sun family villa, but for some reason, the meteorite was bounced back by a very strong force. Now the heavenly eye shows that the meteorite is returning to the sender's address." "Returning to the sender's address?" "It's coming in our direction, don't panic." Fan Xing comforted. "Xian Xing Apartments is explosion-proof and earthquake-proof." The technician wiped off his sweat. It was indeed explosion-proof and earthquake-proof, but there didn't seem to be any mention of meteorite protection. At this moment, the thing that everyone was most worried about happened. The apartment building's emergency evacuation system alarm sounded. The power of the meteorite was too great, and with the apartment's explosion-proof standards, it couldn't withstand it at all. Fan Xing was stunned for a few seconds. Then, the ceiling of the apartment building automatically opened. This was followed by the sound of a series of springs being fired. Fan Xing and all the employees around him were directly launched out of the apartment building and put into an emergency evacuation system. Everything happened so suddenly that they were ejected very high, thousands of meters away from the ground. Fan Xing and the people around him flew in the air. At this moment, he finally couldn't help but curse. Only then did Fan Xing realize that Shouchong's emergency evacuation system only cared about launching, not landing. Chapter 14:13. If he could go online now, Fan Xing really wanted to post a question about how he could survive a rapid fall of several thousand meters when he only had 2 fireball talismans on him. But unfortunately, it seemed that Fan Xing already didn't have the chance to regret it, so that night, news of the meteorite crashing into Xian Xing Apartments and destroying the entire building, and how the building owner had ejected on the spot and fled with his employees spread all over the internet. This miraculous operation of just launching a meteorite without caring about landing instantly sparked a new wave of public opinion. As the saying went, when Brother Black smiled, it was hard to tell whether he would live or die. Created by Brother Chong, he flew into the sky and blew himself up. The apartment building's designer, Shouchong, became famous. In the end, Fan Xing was the only one who survived the accident. He had used the last 2 fireball talismans he had on him to attack the ground the moment he hit the ground, creating a reverse propulsion force to cushion his fall. This saved Fan Xing's life. Although he hadn't died, in the eyes of outsiders, he would have been better off dead than alive. Why is it him again? When the ambulance from Songhai First Military Medical Hospital arrived at the scene, the emergency doctor couldn't help looking stupefied when he saw the dying young man lying on the ground in front of him. He had a deep impression of Fan Xing. After all, not all men had the experience of having their balls pierced by ribs. When Fan Xing had been discharged from the hospital 2 days ago, the emergency doctor had paid special attention to him. He felt that it was a miracle in medical history. Furthermore, it was unlikely that this kind of miracle would happen a second time. But now, the emergency doctor decided to take back his words. Using a portable scanning magic treasure, the emergency doctor started to give Fan Xing a preliminary appraisal and treatment. The situation wasn't optimistic at all. The last time he had been treated, it had only been a comminuted fracture of the skull. But now, apart from his head, it was a slime fracture all over his body. The so-called slime fracture was even more exaggerated than a comminuted fracture. The bones in his body were almost crushed into powder. His whole body was like a pool of slime. A slime fracture all over his body, this kind of case is rare, an accompanying medical staff said with a sigh. To be honest, with this kind of injury, it might be better to be directly smashed into ashes, that might be better. If the strength is great enough to smash a person into ashes, the person who is smashed into ashes won't feel any pain. Thus, Fan Xing's current condition was actually only slightly better than being smashed into ashes. He might as well die. Even if he could be saved, he was destined to be tortured. In fact, it wasn't just the bones problem. After the emergency doctor examined him, he found that Fan Xing's organs were also severely damaged. His organs are all ruptured, and his body is bleeding profusely. The egg and blood have fused together. Under normal circumstances, such severe injuries could basically be declared dead. But what the emergency doctor couldn't believe was that Fan Xing was still breathing. Everything was the same as last time. His injuries were obviously very serious. But Fan Xing was still hanging on to his last breath. His vitality is too tenacious. The emergency doctor sighed. Although Fan Xing's injuries were severe, his heart rate was actually stable. What the hell? He snorted under his breath. Even a health lock cheat wasn't that ridiculous. Of course, Fan Xing did not have the ability to lock his HP. This was just a continuation of the curse that Death Heavenly Law had left on Fan Xing, as long as Fan Xing harbored malicious thoughts towards her. The curse of Final Destination would always be there. Moreover, Fan Xinghui blamed all his resentment on Lotus Sunday, thus, the curse of the heavenly Tao of death became a kind of perpetual motion. So in fact, even if Lotus Sun hadn't sent out the doppelganger Mysterious Sea, Fan Xing would still meet a tragic end in the end. How is it? Should we bring him back? I don't think he can be cured even if we bring him back. This brother was also in our hospital before, and he directly charged 200 million yuan into our account. So don't worry about the medical expenses. The emergency doctor said, moreover, we're doctors, and since we're doctors, saving lives is our duty, no matter how difficult it is to save this person. So, let's take him away. He called out to the medical staff beside him. This was the second time he had saved Fan Xing. Faced with this man's tenacious vitality, all the accompanying doctors were moved. Elsewhere, in the secret realm of the Immortal Star, the girl had smoothly replaced the fourth heavenly Tao magic cube, and at the same time, fused the old one into Mysterious Sea. At this point, Mysterious Sea had become a spirit sword with 4 cores. The Immortal Star was a beautiful place with a pleasant temperature, and rainbow-colored clouds on the horizon were as dazzling as the aurora borealis. This was the legendary peach blossom land of the universe's secret realm, a very suitable place for vacation. Sun Yinger was holding a snow-white creature that looked like cotton. This was an immortal star, a creature whose entire body was as soft as cotton. It was said that each immortal star creature could live for more than 10,000 years. It was as if they could live forever here and never grow old. What a magical place. Lotus Sun sighed with emotion. If it wasn't for the mission to collect magic cubes, she might never have known that such a beautiful vacation spot existed in the universe. The Immortal Star was originally a place suitable for human habitation. But Tao ancestor Wang also modified it for his vacation, said Loopy Toad. The Immortal Star creatures were very amiable. They had lived here for generations and stood aloof from worldly affairs. No one had ever seen an Immortal Star angry before. Because of this, the Immortal Star was also known as the Honest Star. It was Tao ancestor Wang who had given it this nickname, and Loopy Toad thought that there might be a reason for it. After all, there were times when an honest person was enraged, and that was a very scary thing. Who knows, it might even cause a calamity. Fortunately, the immortal star creatures were generally cooperative with the matter of replacing the heavenly Tao magic cube. They couldn't speak, and all of them used their mental power to convey information. Along the way, they led Lotus Sun and the others to successfully complete the mission of replacing the magic cube. With 4 cores, Mysterious Sea was even more powerful. This formidable power was now in the hands of a girl at the Foundation establishment stage. No one could have imagined it. Rongrong, you're going to be invincible. Sun Yinger chuckled. But the girl's expression didn't look as relaxed as she imagined. I feel like everything is going too smoothly. She was worried that there would be more changes in the future. Although nothing had gone wrong with the task of replacing the magic cube so far, that faint sense of worry lingered in the girl's heart the whole time. I think you're thinking too much, Rongrong. Even if something happens, even if the sky falls, Ling Zhenren will be there to hold it up. Sun Yinger comforted her. Tomorrow is the Sword Dao Conference. I think it's better if you think about how to perform at the Sword Dao Conference. I'll practice swordsmanship with you tonight. I'll teach you a new sword technique. I guarantee you'll win. A new sword technique? I was inspired by the dog-beating stick technique in wuxia novels. It's called Whirlwind Dog Chopping Sword. Loopy Toad, ? Chapter 1414. Sun Yinger hadn't come up with this whirlwind dog chopping sword technique. It was a technique she had invented and developed herself. Its advantage was that it had an extremely fast attack speed. As the saying went, speed was the only thing unbeatable in all the martial arts in the world. Once the whirlwind dog chopping sword technique was used, the speed of the sword would continuously increase over time. If she could cultivate this technique to perfection, she could stab out 80 times in a second. It was also very effective against women, because this technique specialized in attacking the lower half of the body, because at the beginning, Sun Yinger had developed this sword technique to deal with Wang Ying. But later, Sun Yinger discovered that not only would her Shadow Dao abilities be greatly reduced in front of Wang Ying, but she would also be forced into a disarmed state. This damn gorilla. But since she had developed this sword technique, Sun Yinger felt that it would be a pity to waste it. What do you think, Rongrong? Do you want to learn it or not? If you want, I can teach you. Sun Yinger was very much looking forward to Lotus Sun learning it and using it in front of everyone. But you haven't told me what the weakness is. Lotus Sun was a little hesitant. She had no doubt about the lethality and destructive power of this sword technique, but the name really didn't sound beautiful at all. It was too crazy, it didn't fit her style as a quiet and beautiful girl. The weakness isn't big, but it's not small either. Sun Yinger said, once you start using this sword technique, you can't stop. You can't stop until you chop the opponent up. Otherwise, you'll go berserk. Chop, the whirlwind dog chopping sword technique is like a soybean milk machine. It first attacks the lower half of the body and turns it into egg paste, and then because of the high attack speed, it rubs against the air and eventually turns it into egg tarts. Lotus Sun, ? So that night, when she got home, Sun Yinger was taken away by Wang Ying. Who knew if Wang Ying had been chopped into egg tarts? Sun Yinger probably couldn't keep her waist the next day, Wednesday, December 9th. Wang Ying still hadn't let Sun Yinger come back in the morning. Lotus Sun lit incense for her on the balcony, then went back to the desk to pick up the list of transfer students that Headmaster Chen had given her, intending to take a good look at it on the way home. Jiang Yingying's name had been at the top of the list, which had made her a little upset. As a result, she hadn't fully understood the other transfer students' information. When she went out, Jiang Xiaoche was already waiting for her at the entrance in his low-key black business car. Good morning, Brother Xiaoche. Lotus Sun greeted him, opened the car door, and leaned against the back seat. Her gaze swept to the rearview mirror in front of her. She saw Jiang Xiaoche's listless face and a pair of deep dark circles under his eyes. Why do I feel like you didn't sleep well? Are you working overtime again? Lotus Sun asked. As far as she could remember, Jiang Xiaoche rarely seemed so dispirited and listless. As Jiang Xiaoche drove, he didn't know whether he should say these things to Lotus Sun or not. But right now, he was so depressed that he couldn't help but pour out all the bitterness in his belly. I seem to have fallen in love with a girl, but, Brother Xiaoche's condition, most girls wouldn't refuse it, right? Unless the girl Brother Che likes isn't an ordinary person. Lotus Sun analyzed, or else. Or what? Jiang Xiaoche was puzzled. Lotus Sun looked at Jiang Xiaoche seriously. Brother Xiaoche, don't tell me you like someone under the age of 14. Recently, she had seen a lawyer with the surname Bao sexually assaulting his adopted daughter, and had even said that he was actually dating his adopted daughter. Such a thick-skinned person disgusted Lotus Sun to the core. That was why there were so many thoughts floating around in his mind. I'm not that beastly. The corners of Jiang Xiaoche's mouth twitched. But that girl is indeed a high school girl. I've been thinking about it for the past 2 days, and I've realized that I really like her. I can wait. Do you have that girl's contact information? Yeah. I even have WeChat. Last night, I scrapped hundreds of accounts. I didn't add any of them. The corners of Lotus Sun's mouth twitched. After all, he was dating a high school girl. If Jiang Xiaoche still used societal methods, it would be strange if he didn't get rejected. I think your brother Xiaoche shouldn't harass other people for the time being. What if that girl goes to the police and they find out that it's you and Grandpa finds out? Lotus Sun kindly reminded him. Miss is right, I'll be careful. Jiang Xiaoche gripped the steering wheel, pulled himself together, and nodded. Lotus Sun sighed silently. After all, Jiang Xiaoche had watched her grow up, so she wasn't worried that he would have any particularly bad intentions. It was just that sometimes he was a little silly. In Lotus Sun's memory, Old Man Sun seemed to have categorized Jiang Xiaoche as having intermittent silly syndrome. In other words, Jiang Xiaoche was usually pretty smart. But once he encountered something that made him feel conflicted, he would do something stupid. Halfway down the road, Jiang Xiaoche noticed that Lotus Sun was looking very seriously at a register, and couldn't help feeling a little curious. Miss, what are you looking at? The register of new students. Headmaster Chen gave me the task of showing them around the campus, Lotus Sun answered, her eyes fixed on the register. She had already memorized most of the information about the new transfer students. What surprised her was that there was actually a foreign transfer student on the list this time. This was a girl from Sun Island named Ryoko Kamiya. According to the information, Kamiya's Mandarin was very poor and she was still learning. Number 60 high was finally in line with international standards. Lotus Sun smiled bitterly in her heart. When the car was about to reach number 60 high's main entrance, there was finally only one page left in the girl's register. She turned the page and was surprised to find that the information on the last page wasn't about the students. It's information on the new teacher. Lotus Sun's pupils contracted slightly. Logically speaking, the student council shouldn't be in charge of the new teacher's information. That was the Human Resources Department's business. Thus, the girl deduced that there was a high chance that Headmaster Chen had made a mistake when he was organizing the information. Filled with curiosity, Lotus Sun began to carefully read the information. He then realized that there were a total of 5 new teachers. Moreover, one of them was the newly appointed vice principal and a math teacher. However, the vice principal's name was a little strange. His name was Fire Ding. Wait a minute. Fire. D? Wasn't that just the word lamp? The girl suddenly thought of a familiar person. Could it be, Senior Golden Lamp was the new vice principal and math teacher? Had Battle Sect finally infiltrated number 60 high school completely? Chapter 14-15. This week was number 60 high school's transfer period, so the school was particularly lively. Until next Monday, there might be new students joining number 60 high school every day. When Wang Ling arrived at the school, several people who had already arrived were discussing this matter. As Wang Ling had expected, that foreigner was the center of attention among the transfer students this time. Several of the boys in the class were having a heated discussion. They were all imagining what kind of person the foreign girl was. Who would have thought that our school would be promoted to a key city high school in just half a semester? Now, she's even famous abroad, and even foreigners are interested. I heard there's a foreign girl called Ryoko Kumiya. I wonder which class she'll be in. Lotus Sun hadn't intentionally leaked the name list, but the name, Ryoko Kumiya, had already spread throughout the school, which Wang Ling found a little strange. Logically speaking, it was impossible for a teacher to leak information about a student in advance, and the name list was in the hands of Lotus Sun, who was the president of the student union. She hadn't told anyone else, so who had leaked the name? After comprehensive consideration, Wang Ling felt that there was only one possible answer to the question, unless Ryoko Kumiya had leaked the information herself in advance. It looked like this girl wasn't easy to deal with. Wang Ling sighed in his heart. He didn't have a vague impression of Sun Island, because he had indeed fought with ninja cultivators from there before. It was a mystical place that was good at combining ninjutsu and cultivation. Of course, not everyone who came from there was an assassin. Sun Island also had kind-hearted locals. Students like Ryoko Kumiya, who had chosen to study abroad, came from well-off families, but most likely couldn't compare to Lotus Sun's family. Where did you get the news? Su Xiao asked as he collected his homework. Everyone was very curious about this student, Ryoko Kumiya, who had come all the way from abroad. Everyone spreading it on the school's chiba, Dopigwa said. I heard that this student Ryoko Kumiya is very beautiful, a great beauty. Also, the Kumiya family is a well-known exorcism family in the area. Exorcism? Wang Ling was startled. In fact, the concept of exorcism wasn't a religion in the local area. Those so-called exorcism organizations essentially did exorcism. It was just that there were differences in how they called it. For example, the people of Sun Island preferred to call it exorcism. Wang Ling wasn't completely unfamiliar with the concept of spirit. After all, when he was very young, Loopy Toad had been a childhood trauma to him. Moreover, he had attended an exorcism convention last semester in search of Bai Qiao. To be honest, those spirits and ghosts were too weak, and weren't a challenge at all. Since young, Wang Ling had rarely been harassed by a spirit. Those who had harassed him had been transcended by the backlash. But even then, the exorcism industry still had great prospects for development. In essence, this line of work seemed to be able to be engaged in as long as a cultivator had a certain level of cultivation. If one did not have enough experience, even a cultivator with a high level of cultivation would very likely fall into the trap. Those specters and malicious ghosts were all very cunning. In Wang Ling's view, the demon race in the demon world was still a little more simple-minded. That was why there had always been a saying on the internet, catching ghosts is harder than catching demons. Because of this, there had been a period of disdain between the demon exorcism faction and the demon hunter faction for a period of time, with each faction looking down on the other. If it wasn't for the fact that the demon world and the human world had reconciled and were planning to develop peacefully, the two factions would probably have fought again. The Jiugong family had chosen to send Jiugong Yoshiko to study in Huaxiao Nation this time. Wang Ling speculated that the Jiugong family's real goal might be to use Jiugong Yoshiko to open up their exorcism market in Huaxiao Nation. Of course, this was just Wang Ling's analysis. Everything was unknown until he met this Jiugong Yoshiko in the country. Wang Ling hoped that this girl wouldn't be in the same class as him. The first class in the morning was math, but Teacher Pan entered the classroom 10 minutes before class started. Students, starting today, our class will welcome a new math teacher. Teacher Hua is also our number 60 high school's new vice headmaster. Let's welcome him with a round of applause. After a burst of fierce applause, a handsome young man with lush hair in a suit stepped into the classroom. Wang Ling almost choked on his saliva when he saw this familiar face. Next to him, Jin Yuan and Gu Xuanji were also stupefied. What's going on? Jin Yuan asked Gu Xuanji telepathically. I think I heard earlier that Senior Golden Lamp wanted to come to number 60 high school, but I didn't expect him to come directly to be a leader. Gu Xuanji smiled bitterly. At that moment, Golden Lamp swept his gaze around and secretly communicated with Wang Ling out of the corner of his eye. It was as if he was saying to Wang Ling, Ling Jinren. Pleasantly surprised or not, exciting or not. It made Wang Ling want to flip the table on the spot. Who knew why a monk who couldn't even figure out functions back then would run over to number 60 high school to be vice headmaster and a part-time math teacher? This didn't make sense. And what Wang Ling couldn't help wanting to ridicule even more was Monk Golden Lamp's lush hair. It was real hair. Through the king's eye, Wang Ling could clearly see that Monk Golden Lamp's hair grew out of the scars on the top of his head. This operation was really too magical, and Wang Ling was stunned on the spot. Hello, students, this poor Taoist's name is Fire Ding, the monk said amiably. Wang Ling could tell that out of professional habit, he had wanted to say, this poor monk, but fortunately his brain had turned around in time, and he had directly failed due to his opening remarks. When he had applied for the job, Monk Golden Lamp had used his experience as a Taoist priest in one of his lives to successfully disguise his identity. As for documents and whatnot, they could all be handed over to the battle sect to handle. Furthermore, Zhuo was around to obtain a teacher's qualification certificate, so it wouldn't be a problem for him to obtain it in a matter of minutes. Today is the first time Teacher Fire Ding has taught a class. Teacher Fire Ding is a very powerful cultivator. I hope that if you have any questions, you can guard against arrogance and rashness and seize this opportunity. Focus on class and don't be distracted. After saying that, Teacher Pan glared at Wang Ling. Wang Ling. I'm talking about you. I knew in the corridor just now that you were distracted during morning self-study. Wang Ling, ? This scene was like the first day of school at number 60 high school. Old Pan left a few words of deterrence before he left. After everyone watched Old Pan leave in search of a private room, Monk Golden Lamp's face suddenly tensed up. Because he saw that Super Chen's body seemed to be glowing. Super Chen, why do I feel like you're glowing from head to toe? Someone rubbed their eyes, thinking they were seeing things. Is it because I'm here that the old version of the light blessing spell that I planted earlier resonated? The monk had never expected that something like this would happen in the end in his first class. Lotus Sun had also been blessed by his body not long ago, but he had used the new version of the light blessing spell at that time, and the glowing resonance bug had long since been fixed. At that moment, the monk had a bad feeling. Without saying anything else, he hurriedly walked over to Super Chen. The monk had no other choice now. The monk could only use the new version of the light blessing spell to replace the old one. Chapter 14:16. There was no doubt that as the new version of the blessing spell covered Super Chen's body, his blessed mouth had been strengthened once more. In the future, Wang Ling felt that he had to be more wary of Super Chen. This guy's mouth was too scary, and it wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that his words were law. He was simply a walking poisonous healer. But Super Chen had to say it unconsciously for it to be effective. He couldn't judge something with a utilitarian mindset, otherwise it would be inaccurate. Wang Ling felt that Super Chen's strengthening today might become a foreshadowing in the future. Now that number 60 high's big shots had gathered, it wouldn't be an exaggeration to call it the affiliated middle school of battle sect. In fact, there was something else that he hadn't expected. In fact, the heavenly Tao of death had already arrived by his side. He was a representative of Heavenly Tao, one of the 6 main seats of the Heavenly Tao Governing Committee, and had initially learned from Wang Ling. However, Death Heavenly Tao was very timid. Speaking of which, he felt a little ashamed. Out of fear of death, he didn't dare get too close to Wang Ling. This psychological shadow had been there ever since the last time Wang Ling had picked up Jinka and put a sword to his neck to interrogate him. He was a Death Heavenly Tao and didn't know shit about Heavenly Tao. How would he dare sit next to Ling Jinren and display his slight skill in front of an expert? Death Heavenly Tao shuddered at the thought of being in the same class as Wang Ling. But those guys from Heavenly Court had forced him to come to number 60 high, so he still had to continue with this task. Therefore, Death Heavenly Tao took a step back and came up with a solution. After Tyrant's morning class ended, he returned to the independent vice principal's office. He felt that he was doing quite well in math class. At first, he didn't even know what a function was, but now it was a piece of cake. Although the learning time was longer, of course, the most time-consuming part was overcoming fear. The mental pressure from Wang Ling's memory brick was so great that it took the monk 3 whole days to come back to his senses. In fact, to this day, there was still a faint shadow in his heart. But as the saying goes, if I don't go to hell, who will? In the end, monk Jin Deng still perfectly displayed the spirit of a monk. In the end, he spent another 3 hours to finish all the math problems he had learned in college. He didn't dare say that he was very good at learning, but at the very least, he definitely wasn't as good as Wang Ling. A monk must be humble. There must be many areas where he is lacking. Learning mathematics in 3 hours was too long. He had to reflect on it. Back in the office, the monk put down the lesson plan in his hands and prepared to make a cup of tea. At this time, there was a knock on the office door, and a young man in overalls walked in. "Hello, I'm here to apply for a position in the security department. I heard that you're still lacking a school guard captain." It turned out that number 60 High's school guard was Old Li, but he was getting on in years. Headmaster Chen decided that after they found a new school guard captain and handed over his duties, Old Li would retire and enjoy his later years in peace. So now, there were people who came to apply for the position. The monk felt that this young man's aura was a little familiar. He turned around and saw that it was Death Heavenly Tao. "It's you?" "It's me." Death Heavenly Tao's mouth twitched. At the same time, Tyrant fell into silence. The Heavenly Law Gate, this matter could be said to have become history again. This was simply unprecedented. "Aren't you here to learn?" The monk laughed. "I wouldn't dare." Death Heavenly Tao sighed. "I think this position is actually quite suitable for me. If anyone tries to touch me, I'll directly take them away." The monk was silent for a bit, then replied, "But you should go to the HR department. I'm not in charge of this. There are a lot of people applying now, can't you go through the back door?" Death Heavenly Tao said. Considering that the Heavenly Tao also wanted face, after saying this, Death Heavenly Tao closed the office door. Then, he suddenly knelt down with a thud and hugged the monk's thigh. "Senior Golden Lamp. Save the child. Let go first," the monk sighed. "Actually, I think Ling Jinren is very cute. He's not that scary. Besides, you made a great contribution in rescuing Miss Sun, so Ling Jinren definitely won't do anything to you." Death Heavenly Tao knelt on the ground and rested his hands on his thigh. "But I still don't have the courage." "Fine, you get up first. As for the school guard captain, this humble Taoist will think of a way." Golden Lamp helped Death Heavenly Tao up. Since Wang Ling's appearance, the entire Heavenly Tao had become humble. Although the Heavenly Tao began to become more slick, it seemed to have lost its original momentum. The monk didn't know whether this was a good thing or not. He felt that it was because the Heavenly Tao didn't have a good understanding of Wang Ling. Ling Jinren was so cute. When he ate crispy noodle snacks, his cheeks puffed up like a cute little hamster. What was there to be afraid of? It was lunchtime at number 60 High School. From the start of this semester, number 60 High School's lunchtime system had been abolished. The canteen no longer prepared lunchboxes in advance and delivered them to the classroom doors. All students had to walk to the canteen to eat, and there were no longer any special services for the elite students. Wang Ling heard that Headmaster Chen even planned to change the school uniform so that all number 60 High School students would wear the elite school uniform. Everyone in number 60 High School was an elite. Although there was an elite class, it meant that the students were the best of the best. So even if they were students from the regular classes or remedial classes, as long as they were students of number 60 High School, they were also elites. Eliminating differential treatment was actually a sign of progress. Wang Ling felt that Headmaster Chen was a very far-sighted man. As a teacher, he should treat all students equally. For lunch today, Mother Wan had prepared sweet and sour pork, pepper and salt pork ribs, seaweed egg soup, steamed okra and stir-fried vegetables, all of which were nutritionally balanced. Apart from this, there was also a new dish that Mother One had invented called black fungus stewed with fatty big C. The students could choose to taste it. Wang Ling took the food and chose a corner seat to sit down. There were too many people in the canteen, and he actually didn't really want to eat in a crowded place. He planned to casually take a bite or two and then leave straight away. Super Chen and Hero Guo also came over with their plates and sat down next to Wang Ling with ease. Being able to eat with familiar people finally soothed Wang Ling's mood a little. The corner seats were for 4 people, and after Hero Guo and Super Chen took their seats, there was only one seat left. "Why isn't Lotus Sun here?" Super Chen asked. He put his legs across the empty chair next to him, intending to reserve a seat for Lotus Sunday. "She doesn't come here to eat, as it's easy for a stampede to happen." Hero Guo said, "So student Lotus Sun's food is delivered directly to the office, just like the teachers." "Office?" "The student union office, that's where she eats," Hero Guo said. "Classmate Wang Ling, can I sit here?" At that moment, a sweet female voice rang out. Wang Ling, Super Chen and Hero Guo raised their heads and were surprised to see a girl who actually looked a little like Lotus Sun. Furthermore, this girl wasn't wearing number 60 High's school uniform, and had come in casual clothes. She wore a casual white off-the-shoulder short-sleeved top and a denim skirt, which stunned Super Chen and Hero Guo on the spot. Out of 10 points, this leg was definitely worth 9 points. "Please sit down." Super Chen quickly moved his leg away. Wang Ling, at that moment, this unfamiliar girl took the initiative to stretch out her hand to Wang Ling. "Hello, classmate Wang Ling, I'm a new transfer from Sword God Academy. I'm here to register today and will officially report in tomorrow. I'm Jiang Yingying." Chapter 14-17. In his heart, Wang Ling despised Super Chen's ungrateful behavior. But very quickly, Super Chen made up for it. Jiang Yingying stretched out her hand to shake his, but Super Chen grabbed it instead. "Jiang Yingying, right?" "Hello, classmate Jiang, I'm Super Chen. I'm also classmate Wang Ling's best bro." Jiang Yingying was a little disgusted at first by this man who acted so familiar with her, but when she heard that Super Chen was Wang Ling's best bro, she suppressed the urge to shake his hand off. "So it's classmate Super Chen, I know you. You did very well in the 9 Dragons Mountain competition." Jiang Yingying smiled. Of course, this was just a courtesy. All her attention had been drawn to a speck of ashes in the era, and she actually didn't remember Super Chen's brilliant performance at all. But before coming to number 60 high school, Jiang Yingying had done as much homework as she could. It was just that Super Chen was Wang Ling's best bro. She had been negligent. She had to record it later. This would help Jiang Yingying find out more about Wang Ling's side in his heart. A beautiful transfer student suddenly taking the initiative to come over for a chat at lunchtime. Sure enough, she was too eye-catching. He wondered if he should bring his own bento to school in the future. No rice. Wang Ling could make his own bento. Braised crispy noodle soup, crispy noodle soup. He just needed to separate the bags, which was very convenient. Actually, Wang Ling himself was also very puzzled. He was already so low-key, and had even deliberately shaped his face to look like he thought he wasn't particularly handsome. But why could he still attract girls? Could it really be because of old Wang's strange DNA? And so, he faced Jiang Yingying. Wang Ling really wanted to reply, "What on earth do you like about me? I'll change, all right?" But there were too many eyes in front of him, and he couldn't say it. Given that most of the people in the canteen were single dogs, Wang Ling's words were nothing more than adding fuel to the fire. If he really said it, in the eyes of many boys, this was nothing more than taking advantage of the situation. "Our Wang Ling doesn't like to talk, he's just like that. What can I do for you, classmate Jiang?" Super Chen was very friendly. Although it was his first time meeting Jiang Yingying, she gave him a very good first impression. "Actually, it's nothing much." Jiang Yingying smiled, her eyes fixed on Wang Ling. I'm a fan of classmate Wang Ling. The essay you wrote during the Nine Dragons mountain range competition really opened my eyes. It would have been better if she hadn't said it. Once she did, Wang Ling instantly understood everything. F***ck. So this girl was Crispy Noodles' fault. Wang Ling lowered his head and pretended to eat, while his other hand stretched under the table to make calculations. Very quickly, he understood the ins and outs of everything, as well as Jiang Yingying's real reason for transferring to number 60 high school. For Wang Ling, there was no such thing as asking for advice on composition. Love, it was even more impossible. Wang Ling felt that this Miss Jiang Yingying's intentions were misplaced. Moreover, at the very least, even if they were in love, that had to be done in accordance with the basic laws. Who would rush to get promoted right after transferring to another school? The food in number 60 High's canteen isn't bad. Today's sweet and sour pork was pretty good. Wang Ling, do you like meat too? Jiang Yingying had only sat down for a few seconds before she started looking for a topic of conversation. It was said that everyone knew what Sima Zhao was thinking. As long as one wasn't a fool, anyone could see Jiang Yingying's intentions. Super Chen's heart ached again. He didn't understand what on earth was so good about Wang Ling. Why were all the girls willing to surround him? Couldn't they consider him a bit? Jiang Yingying's question. Wang Ling continued to remain silent. He looked incomparably calm on the surface, but he was panicking inside. As good brothers, Super Chen and Hero Gua could read the helplessness in Wang Ling's eyes. Classmate Jiang, I told you, Wang Ling is like this. Don't take offense. Are you from Divine Sword Academy? I actually wanted to ask you, how's your captain, Yi Jiang, doing now? Super Chen tried to change the subject. But Jiang Yingying only had eyes for Wang Ling. Wang Ling, can you still eat? I haven't touched the meat, I still have some here. As the saying went, don't talk while eating, don't talk while sleeping. A man who didn't talk while eating was so handsome. Jiang Yingying was full of joy. She wasn't angry at Wang Ling for not answering her question and remaining silent. On the contrary, she felt that Wang Ling was a single-minded boy. Wang Ling read Jiang Yingying's thoughts and was so shocked that he almost dropped his chopsticks. Someone save him. Elsewhere, Lotus Sun was enjoying her lunch in the student union office. She actually wanted to go to the canteen and eat with Wang Ling. But it was too easy to cause a commotion, and for safety and order, there was nothing she could do about it. Lotus Sun. Lotus Sun. At that moment, a very urgent voice came from outside the office. Lotus Sun looked up and saw Class 2's Li Yuyue rushing over with a worried expression. Bad news. Li Yuyue slammed her palm on Lotus Sun's desk, shaking the bowl of soup on the table until it spilled over. What's the matter? Speak slowly. Lotus Sun took out 2 pieces of paper and wiped the soup off the table. Li Yuyue cried out in alarm, your husband Wang Ling is going to be snatched away. You, don't talk nonsense. The girl instantly blushed. Hey. Last time I helped you make a love bento, I thought you two could be together. In the end, I found out that you two are so long-winded. Li Yuyue had a disappointed expression as she spread her hands and sat down. Classmate Wang Ling is a blockhead, but you're not. Just grab him and smash him against the wall. You haven't told me what you meant by what you said just now. What do you mean, he's going to be snatched away? Lotus Sun didn't understand. She calmly picked up the bowl of soup and took a sip, as if deep in thought. Actually, she had a rough idea of what had happened. But the more it was like this, the more she couldn't appear flustered. Otherwise, wouldn't others laugh at her? She's a transfer student. Her name is Jiang Yingying. She came to school to register today, and is eating with Wang Ling in the canteen right now, said Li Yuyue. As her bestie, she naturally had to speak bluntly. It's just eating, it's fine. Classmate Wang Ling won't care about her, will he? Lotus Sun smiled calmly. You're actually so calm. Li Yuyue found it a little unbelievable. She had wanted to observe the girl's reaction when she stomped her feet anxiously, but in the end, the girl's calm attitude in the face of danger was far beyond her expectations. Lotus Sun took out her phone and seemed to have sent a message somewhere. Right after that, she calmly ate her meal. Li Yuyue didn't understand what Lotus Sun had done. At the girl's gesture, she walked over to the window of the student union office, and saw Jiang Yingying walk out of the canteen with a flustered expression. What did you do? Li Yuyue was a little incredulous. Do you know about the Gray Sect? Lotus Sun asked lightly as she picked up some food. Gray Sect? Which new literary exchange sect was set up among students? It seems they're all fans of Wang Ling's essays. Li Yuyue replied. Recently, Gray Sect culture had been very popular on the internet. Although she wasn't a member, it was impossible for her not to have heard of it. I just sent her an edict and sent her away, Lotus Sun replied. Edict? Of course, because I'm the sect leader. Lotus Sun answered calmly with a smile on her face. Why are you the sect leader? I just need to pay. Isn't it easy to be the sect leader? Lotus Sun smiled. In fact, the position of sect leader of the Gray Sect. She had already taken it down during the morning self-study session. She had calculated that Jiang Yingying would most likely launch a surprise attack. So she had made preparations in advance. Who would have thought it would actually come in handy? Ding. At that moment, Lotus Sun's phone suddenly vibrated. She received a text from Wang Ling, "Thank you." Although the text was as concise as ever. The joy in the girl's heart was self-evident. This was the first time Wang Ling had taken the initiative to text her. Chapter 14:18. Gray Church Order. All instructors are to immediately head to the designated coffee shop for an important meeting and discussion. You are not to be absent without a valid reason. Otherwise, you will be expelled from the Gray Church and viewed as classmate Wang Ling's anti-fan. This was a message Lotus Sun had issued as the church leader. It actually wasn't a very important meeting, but everyone who attended would receive a red packet as a reward. It wasn't too bad. Giving out money was the most practical way to ensure that most of the Gray Church's grassroots wouldn't have any objections. For young girls, money was like dung. It would be very convenient for Wang Ling to send Jiang Yingying away by giving out money. Because he didn't need to rack his brains to predict the other party's actions and then formulate countermeasures, but for Lotus Sun, it was a little inconvenient. It was much better than watching helplessly as other girls harassed Wang Ling. When Jiang Yingying received the order and hurried to the coffee shop that the Gray Church was working with, there were already Gray Church officers waiting there. These officers were all volunteers, some weren't students, but had all joined voluntarily after being attracted by Wang Ling's essays. Having these volunteers working in the church was actually a good thing for students who were busy with their studies, since they could help out with management. What important meeting did the church leader announce? Jiang Yingying hurried to the coffee shop. She saw a lot of students from nearby schools who had hurried out during their lunch break to gather here. What on earth is it? Did classmate Wang Ling publish a new essay? There were both men and women in the crowd, but most of them were literature enthusiasts. No, it's actually nothing important, said one of the volunteer officers, who was in fact the coffee shop's curator. The curator smiled. Actually, the new church leader is giving out benefits to everyone. After everyone signs in, they can come to me for a red packet of 1,000 yuan as a creative fund. New church leader? Jiang Yingying looked puzzled, as if she didn't know about this. The new church leader was handed over this morning, and the old church leader stepped back to be the deputy church leader. He felt that the new church leader was more qualified than him. Those who are capable will be in charge. Also, the new church leader is very wealthy, which will help the Gray Church develop further, the curator said with a smile. He spoke up for Lotus Sun every time he opened his mouth, so of course he had received benefits. This was the evil side of a money-oriented society. However, Jiang Yingying was still relatively naive. She didn't understand why so many things had happened while she was registering at number 60 high school in the morning. Classmate Jiang, this is yours. The curator distributed the cash and registered Jiang Yingying's name. It was not until she received the red packet that Jiang Yingying realized that she had been tricked. She had clearly hooked up with classmate Wang Ling in the canteen earlier. In the end, he suddenly received an urgent message from the Grey Church's hierarch. In addition, this new sect leader was so generous with his money, which almost instantly reminded Jiang Yingying of the #1 enemy she would face after transferring to number 60 high school. Lotus Sun. The new sect master must be her. Damn it. What a cunning woman. Jiang Yingying gritted her teeth gloomily. She wanted to shout at the blatant bribery in the cafe. However, when she saw the smiles on the faces of everyone who received the red packets, she immediately understood that she was still too young. It could only be said that he deserved to be the future leader of Huaguo Water Curtain Group. This method of buying people's hearts was indeed skillful. Jiang Yingying didn't have that much money on her, and she was too embarrassed to ask her grandfather for help. She could only think of another way. She, Jiang Yingying, wouldn't give up. Lotus Sun, we'll see. Jiang Yingying snorted in her heart. Then, she put the red packet back in her pocket. Elsewhere, in the student union, it took Lotus Sun a long time to calm down. Wang Ling had actually taken the initiative to text her. This was a first. A first that would go down in the annals of history. She was so happy that she couldn't put it into words. She had no choice but to cast the cooling spell on herself. The more it was like this, the more she couldn't let victory get to her head. For Lotus Sun, the battle had just begun. Jiang Yingying would be a problem after she officially enrolled at school tomorrow. She was the #1 target she had to be wary of. Apart from that, the second biggest problem was that girl from Sun Island, Ryoko Q. Lotus Sun was actually no stranger to this person. This was because Huaguo Water Curtain Group and the Ryoko family actually had close dealings. The Ryoko family had once sent Ryoko Q to attend the company's annual party, and had met Lotus Sun face to face. Lotus Sun hadn't expected the Ryoko family to actually make a decision this year to send Ryoko Q to study in Huaxiu Nation, and to choose number 60 high. Was this a coincidence? Or could it be that from the beginning, Jimiya Ryoko's target had been him or someone from number 60 high? On the way back from school, Lotus Sun stared at the "thank you" message on her phone with a red face. This message was so precious that she had already written it down in her little notebook, in case she lost it. If one's mood could be said to symbolize the weather, then Lotus Sun, who was behind the car, was sunny for miles, while Jiang Xiaoche, who was driving, was rainy. This strong contrast made Lotus Sun feel a little uncomfortable. "Brother Xiaoche, haven't you adjusted yet?" Jiang Xiaoche sighed. "I lost another 300 accounts, I told you long ago, you have to change your approach. This kind of continuous harassment definitely won't work." Lotus Sun, who was in a good mood, decided to give Jiang Xiaoche some advice. "Who on earth is that girl?" "Jiang Yingying." Jiang Xiaoche muttered the name weakly. "Jiang Yingying?" Lotus Sun thought she had heard wrong, and was dumbfounded for a moment. She was utterly astonished. Could it be that this world was really that small? "Brother Xiaoche. I need to confirm whether this girl's Jiang is the Jiang in Ginger, and Ying is the Ying in Firefly? She also has short hair, has the air of a scholarly girl, and looks very gentle and quiet. Also, she looks a little like me?" Lotus Sun asked tentatively. "How do you know?" Jiang Xiaoche looked at Lotus Sun in amazement. "I also know that she's a student at Sword God Academy. She used to be, but she might not be now." Lotus Sun didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "This Miss Yingying has already transferred to our school. She even came to register her student status this morning. What a coincidence." Jiang Xiaoche found it hard to believe. "And Sword God Academy is pretty good, why would she want to transfer to number 60 high?" "I guess she probably likes classmate Wang Ling," Lotus Sun replied. Jiang Xiaoche felt like he had a complete mental breakdown. How could he cultivate Why was it this again, dead fish eyes? Chapter 14:19. When Lotus Sun got home, she found Sun Yinger sprawled on the bed as if she had lost her soul. It looked like she had fought hundreds of rounds with CEO-ing last night, and had only just been released. How are you? Lotus Sun walked over and cast the waist cooling spell on Sun Yinger's waist. This was a new spell that the girl had developed on her own, and could lower the temperature of the waist joints when necessary, thereby reducing pain. She found that the temperature cooling spell had many uses. Not only could it calm the mind, it could also be used as a remedy for injuries and strain. In some sense, the temperature cooling spell could greatly reduce the frequency of women being violated, both at home and abroad. And it turned out that Lotus Sun really had foresight. Because in the near future, the temperature cooling spell would really evolve into a new generation of female anti-pervert spells, and be named the Ice Bird spell. It was said that someone who had developed the Thunder spell, Thousand Birds, had come up with this name. It could only be said that Chinese culture was broad and profound. The same birds had completely different meanings. Does it hurt? After casting the temperature cooling spell, Lotus Sun gently massaged Sun Yinger. Hee hee, Rong Rong. I was just pretending. You fell for it. Who knew that at that moment, Sun Yinger would suddenly turn over and press Lotus Sun down on the bed. She propped her hands on either side of Lotus Sun's head and stared fixedly at her. The breath was so close that it could reach Lotus Sun's cheeks. The girl took a deep breath, and the expression on her face was a lot calmer than Sun Yinger had imagined. You're actually immune? Shouldn't you be blushing under normal circumstances? Sun Yinger said strangely, and then nodded with satisfaction. Ah. It's all my credit. As expected of me. Under my careful training, Rongrong's skin has become thicker now. I've laid the groundwork for Rongrong to chase Ling Zhenren. I noticed, you're asking for a beating. No wonder CEO Ing likes to bully you so much. Lotus Sun looked at the person in front of her helplessly. I still have something important to do today. It's the Sword Dao conference, and I can't delay it. Get up first, be good, okay, Rongrong. It looks like you're immune to ordinary teasing now. I need to give you some extra training. At that moment, Sun Yinger's eyes turned shiftily. She suddenly made a hand seal and turned herself into Wang Ling. But the voice was still her own. Come. Rongrong. Let's kiss. You're too much. Lotus Sun pushed Sun Yinger away with all her might, and in the end, her face couldn't help burning up. She thought she was used to it. But only the heavens knew where this last Sun Yinger got her acting skills from. 8th, no random movements are allowed. At that moment, Loopy Toad's figure appeared in front of the two women in a golden teleportation light. When it landed, Loopy Toad brought with it Wang Ying's new rule. It looked at the scene in front of it and felt that it was too beautiful. Sun Yinger hadn't removed the transfiguration spell yet, so she still used Wang Ling's face, but she was still wearing her signature black and white dress. Their lord was actually forced to dress in women's clothing. Although Loopy Toad knew that everything was fake, why did it still hurt its eyes so much? Needless to say, this Sun Yinger was truly too daring. Seeing Loopy Toad arrive, it was as if she had found her savior. Has the Sword Dao conference started? Loopy Toad nodded. Today's the group stage. You need to compete with the other 199 sword spirits in the king group to break through and become number 1 in your group. Let's go. Lotus Sun summoned Mysterious Sea and gripped the spirit sword tightly with a solemn expression. Nine Nether had chosen a relatively open area as the venue for the group stage this time. This was a deserted ancient sword city, the old sword capital of the Sword King world, and the center of the imperial capital 1,000 years ago. Because of its remote location, it was very inconvenient to transport resources and people, so the old sword capital had been abandoned after the capital was moved and became a deserted city. Lotus Sun and Loopy Toad arrived in front of the old sword capital. The old sword capital's city walls were much shorter than the new one, and had collapsed in many places. The stone city gates had long since been damaged, and were wide open. The outlines of old houses could be seen inside, but they were very badly worn out. After the old sword capital became a deserted city, it had become a place for many sword spirits to fight, and a natural training ground. But because of the Sword Tao conference today, this ancient sword city from the old era had finally regained some of its former liveliness. The city was a boiling cauldron of voices and bustling with noise. The sword spirits who were participating in the competition as well as those who were watching the melee had all arrived. What an amazing feeling. I never thought it would be on such a large scale this time. Lotus Sun couldn't help sighing in front of the ancient city. The girl didn't know that Nine Nether and the sword spirits under her command, Yu Ling, Mo Yu, Little Qian, Carter and the others, had worked together to mobilize countless sword spirits to hold this event. They had put in a lot of effort. Due to the lack of time, they hadn't even had time to build a new venue for the final battle. Nine Nether had originally wanted to build a new arena similar to the #1 martial arts dojo in the world. But due to time constraints, they could only use the old swords. There was a ready-made sword arena in the old sword capital. Although it was very dilapidated, it could still be used after some temporary repairs. Furthermore, it was as grand as 8 stadiums that could hold 100,000 people. All the participating sword spirits had been temporarily arranged to wait in the Sword King dojo on the edge of the arena. This had been the largest inn in the old sword capital. Now, it was being used again after some simple repairs. Lotus Sun verified her spirit's sword with a sword guard at the entrance, and the latter's expression changed. So it's Miss Sun. The sword guard solemnly stood on both feet and saluted Lotus Sun before handing her a competition card. Miss Sun, please go to the top floor Sky Room 1. Thank you. The girl took the competition card with both hands, feeling a little nervous. She still had too little experience participating in a competition of this scale. Furthermore, the sword spirits in the king group, were they all experts? Could she really win? As she walked up the stairs, Lotus Sun heard a lot of sword spirits talking about her. Ah. It's that human girl, I remember her surname is Sun. She'll be competing with her sword spirit. So that mysterious sea is hers? She's a hot favorite to win the championship. These were the voices of the other contestants. At first, the girl felt a little embarrassed when she heard this, and smiled modestly. She walked briskly all the way to her resting room. When she sat down, she could still hear her own heartbeat. Nervous? Asked Loopy Toad. A little. Lotus Sun nodded. There's nothing to be nervous about. Miss Sun just needs to perform as usual. At that moment, Wu Jin and Old Barbarian specially came over from their resting rooms to pay their respects. They were accompanied by Leng Ming. The two men held Leng Ming's small hands, one on the left and one on the right, and they looked like a family of 3 as they walked over. Sun Yinger was startled. Holy shit. It's only been a few days since I last saw you. How come you two already have a child? Old Barbarian and Wu Jin? Leng Ming? Chapter 1420. It wasn't strange for Sun Yinger to have such a strange way of thinking. This was because if 2 sword spirits fell in love with each other and wanted to give birth to a new sword spirit, they could enter the primal chaos together. There was no such thing as a pair in the human world. Thus, in theory, 2 sword spirits of the same gender could give birth to a new sword spirit. As a matter of fact, the sword spirit's appearance was different from that of a male or female. In the Sword King realm, the gender of a sword spirit was only a matter of appearance. But in essence, all sword spirits were sexless, and there was no real distinction between genders. In the face of Sun Yinger's unintentional offense, Wu Jin and Old Barbarian didn't care too much. After all, Leng Ming's appearance had been very sudden. It was obvious that Lotus Sun and the others probably didn't know of Leng Ming's existence. Miss Sun, this child is called Leng Ming, and he's a new little sword spirit born in the Sword King realm. We didn't give birth to him. Wu Jin laughed. Thinking of what Lotus Sun had just said, his sissy face blushed a little. Old Barbarian rolled his eyes. Why the hell are you blushing? So it's a new little sword spirit. So cute. Lotus Sun squatted down and gently touched Lang Ming's face. Feeling a little embarrassed, Lang Ming shrunk behind Wu Jin. At the same time as she touched Lang Ming's soft cheek, Mysterious C's passive ability, Silent Nourishment, was activated. Wisps of invisible sword chi seeped into Lang Ming's body. Lotus Sun felt her vision blur, and she immediately saw Lang Ming's appearance clearly. This was the first time Mysterious C had used this passive skill, and it mainly used a specific kind of sword chi to identify things. This sword chi had the power to separate the false from the true and see through illusions. But it wasn't invincible, and not all illusions could be seen through. The King's Eye also had this kind of power, but in comparison, Silent Nourishment's sword chi was far inferior. And now, this power was reflected back to Lotus Sun through the passive version of One with the Sword. This gave Lotus Sun the ability to Silent Nourishment as well. It could be said that the current Mysterious C and Lotus Sun could almost be said to be one and the same. Lotus Sun also had all the passive abilities Mysterious C had. This little guy is actually a blade of grass. She rubbed her eyes to make sure she wasn't seeing things. Lang Ming might look young, but he has a bright future ahead of him. When he grows up, even a blade of grass can cut down the sun, moon, and stars. Wu Jin rubbed Lang Ming's little head and said, "Oh, by the way, Miss Sun still doesn't know that Lord Jinka has already agreed to accept Lang Ming as his disciple, right? You've already taken him in as a disciple?" Lotus Sun was astonished. Yes. Old Barbarian nodded. In fact, this is the Sword King's protection for him. Otherwise, who knows how many evil people would have targeted this little guy. In this day and age, pedophiles are as common as the hairs on a cow. Whether it's a boy or a girl, you have to protect yourself. That's right. Loopy Toad nodded and couldn't agree anymore. Then it glanced at Lotus Sunday. You actually don't know? I remember I sent you a text message. Ah, sorry, maybe I wasn't paying attention. Lotus Sun held her forehead. Don't worry, I know it's a different price. I'll settle it with you. For the past 2 days, she had been too focused on dealing with Jiang Yingying that she had been distracted. Boss? Wu Jin and Old Barbarian had puzzled expressions on their faces at the same time. After not seeing each other for a few days, they felt that the relationship between Lotus Sun and Loopy Toad had suddenly become complicated. She's my boss now, and I'm responsible for gathering intelligence and reporting to her, Loopy Toad replied. Then Ling Jinren? Ling Jinren is naturally my boss. Ling Jinren is my spiritual boss. Miss Sun is my material boss. Loopy Toad's answer was full of survival instincts. Got it. Wu Jin and Old Barbarian instantly understood. A boss and a lady boss. Is that what you mean? More or less. Loopy Toad nodded. Don't talk nonsense. Lotus Sun was helpless. They had gone around in a big circle just to tease her. There was no one else. Everyone waited in Lotus Sun's heavenly room for about 5 or 6 minutes, and then they saw a sexy woman with a graceful figure wearing leather tights walk in from outside with a crystal magic ball in her hands. It was none other than Carter. The Bronze Group's group competition is about to begin. I'll take Lang Ming there, Carter said as she put the crystal ball on the table. Carter said as she placed the crystal ball on the table. This magic ball can be used for a live broadcast. Everyone will be able to see what's going on in the arena from their rooms. Thank you, Senior Carter. Lotus Sun smiled. Miss Sun, you're welcome. Please do your best in today's competition. According to the competition schedule, the King Group's showdown is the last group. After the introduction, Carter took Lang Ming's hand and left. He looked very nervous, and Lotus Sun could see the cold sweat running down Lang Ming's forehead as they left the room. Is the little guy really going to be okay? He looks even more nervous than I am. Lotus Sun was a little worried. It's his first time in a free-for-all. It's inevitable that he's nervous, Wu Jin said. By the way, is his battle strength really okay? I remember that this child just has a higher talent value. The free-for-all stage tests his actual battle strength, Loopy Toad asked. I heard that Lord Jinka and Lord Bai Qiao gave Leng Ming special training before the Sword Dao competition. It shouldn't be a problem for him to win first place in the bronze group, Wu Jin said after a moment of silence. It's only been less than 2 days. Loopy Toad was amazed. You underestimate Leng Ming's talent too much. For a genius, what they can learn in 2 hours may be more than what some people learn in 200 days, Wu Jin replied. Loopy Toad couldn't refute this, because it was the truth. Another 10 minutes or so passed. The image of the magic ball was projected onto the grand ancient sword city's sword arena. Countless sword spirits were seated in the spectator area, and it was a dazzling sight. Every corner of the arena seemed to be filled with sword spirits like sardines. In less than 2 days, the Sword Dao competition had actually expanded to this scale. For one thing, Nine Nether and the others were indeed very good at organizing, and for another, Sword God Alloy was indeed very attractive. The Sword Dao competition was about to begin. At the same time, in the Sky No. 2 room next to Lotus Sun's, Wang Ling was also watching the competition. Like a projector, his king's eye directly projected the image on the screen into the air. On the table in the room, there were crispy noodle snacks of various flavors. On the side, Jinka sighed silently. Sword Master, don't you want to go next door and say hello? Wang Ling shook his head. He hadn't come for Lotus Sun in the first place. He just wanted to see Leng Ming's performance. Then, he would help Lotus Sun investigate if there were any suspicious people standing in the way of her winning first place. That was right. It was just in passing. Chapter 1421. Although Jinka had already taken Leng Ming as his disciple, he still needed to determine whether Wang Yuan's spirit sword was Leng Ming's through this actual combat. He needed to know how much Leng Ming had grown after 2 days of special combat training. This Sword Dao competition was a good opportunity to test Leng Ming's learning efficiency. For him, learning ability was the key. After all, to find a spirit sword suitable for little girl Nguyen's nanny, he had to be proficient in everything, and Leng Ming still had a lot to learn. The bronze group competition was about to begin. At the very front of the audience area at the old swordplay field was a spectator stand made entirely of crystal for the judges. Nine Nether, the sweet-talking Yuling, the sweet-talking Mou, and Little Qian. The 4 judges of this Sword Dao competition were all sitting in this crystal room. The bronze group competition is about to begin. I wonder how that little guy is doing. Yuling said. She crossed her slender legs, and her pink high pants Chong Sam fell to the ground along her long legs, attracting the attention of many sword spirits in the audience area. White. Idiot. Those are safety pants. You're the idiots. How can you disrespect Lady Yuling? Move your filthy eyes away. In the Sword King world, Yuling had always been very popular, which was to be expected. Mou also had a lot of fans, but because she was too active, she often showed her face in front of outsiders. Compared with Yuling, she seemed a little less mysterious. Ignoring the discussion in the audience area, Nine Nether also looked forward to the bronze group competition. I heard that Lord Jinka personally gave Leng Ming special training. What kind of special training? Mou asked curiously, the jade corolla on her head giving off a beautiful light. It seems to be mixed doubles. Lord Jinka and Lady Bai Qiao together, Nine Nether answered. F***K, isn't that domestic violence? Mou immediately felt sorry for Leng Ming. It was repaired after the fight. To prevent Leng Ming from being traumatized, I heard that Lady Bai Qiao erased his memory of the special training. Erased it? Then what's the point? Because he doesn't need to use his brain to remember it. Later in the battle, Leng Ming might just show muscle memory. Yuling and Mou were both shocked. Just how many times did he get beaten up to form muscle memory? Very soon, the sound of gongs and drums reverberated throughout the entire sword battle arena. The 200 sword spirits from the bronze group entered the arena. The 4 entrances to the sword battle arena were opened at the same time. At each entrance, 50 sword spirits were led into the arena by the Imperial Sword Guards in an orderly manner. They were arranged into 4 rows, forming a square formation. Leng Ming was in the group that came out from the eastern entrance. He was extremely small, but he stood at the very front. He looked like a tiny dot. In the spectator seats, many sword spirits were discussing this matter. This is the sword master's new disciple. It looks very ordinary to me. It reached the top of the sword steel with its extremely high talent value, but it has only been a few days since it was born. How strong can its actual combat strength be? Although the news that Jinka had accepted Leng Ming as a disciple had already spread like wildfire throughout the Sword King world, doubts were inevitable. No one doubted Leng Ming's talent. After all, the numbers on the sword steel could not be fake. But it had actually been less than 2 days since Jinka had accepted Leng Ming as a disciple to the start of the Sword Dao competition. Rounding up the number of hours, it hadn't even been 2 days. In such a short period of time, how much could a newly born sword spirit grow? Many people would draw a question mark on it. Facing the sea of people around the sword battle arena and listening to the doubts in the air, Lotus Sun frowned slightly. In the heavenly room, Lotus Sun frowned slightly. She was worried about Leng Ming. She had wanted to take advantage of the Sword Dao competition to look for a sword spirit for Wang Yuan during the competition, but the atmosphere now was really too tense. She couldn't help feeling her heart in her throat. After all, it's such a grand Sword Dao competition. Just looking at it makes one's heart pound. It's normal for Miss Sun to feel emotional, Wu Jin comforted her on the side. Rongrong's nervous reaction is so cute. Sun Yinger giggled on the side. Do you feel like you're waiting for your child's report card to come out? Lotus Sun was startled. Needless to say, Sun Yinger's words were spot on. It would have been better if she hadn't said it. Now that she said it, it did seem like a little. This was clearly her first time meeting Leng Ming, but she didn't know why she felt so worried for him. Maybe it was because he was Jinka's disciple. Since he had been accepted as Jinka's disciple, did student Wang Ling also have high hopes for Leng Ming? Little guy, you must do your best. Lotus Sun clenched her fists as she silently cheered Leng Ming on in her heart. Kiki. Sun Yinger gave a meaningful smile on the side. She hadn't paid much attention to the competition, and her gaze had been fixed on Lotus Sun the entire time. In comparison, the girl's interesting reaction was much more exciting than the competition. Imagine her family's Rongrong taking care of a child 10 years from now. Then, she would take her child to the parent-teacher conference and wait for that final report card. Perhaps she would be very nervous, right? Sun Yinger shook her head quickly as her imagination ran wild. She felt that she was thinking too much. What child? How could she have imagined the problem of having a child, and even if she had a child, who would it be with was also a problem? Wang Ying? That abominable gorilla? She would jump down from here and starve to death. And she would never agree to be with this guy. Boom! At that moment, the image in the magic ball was accompanied by a blazing explosion in the center of the sword battle arena. While Sun Yinger's imagination was running wild, the bronze group's free-for-all had already begun. To everyone's surprise, they had thought that this free-for-all would be a battle royale. In the end, the moment 9 Nether announced the start of the competition, except for Leng Ming. All the bronze group spirit swords turned into sword light and soared into the sky. Their movements were synchronized, and their targets were astonishingly synchronized. A total of 199 sword lights of different colors charged at Leng Ming. When these sword lights collided, there was a huge explosion. 2 spirit swords, 1 ice and 1 fire, broke through the thick smoke. They were the famous Ice and Fire brothers of the Bronze Group, and had been chosen to participate in this free-for-all according to their ranking. They were ranked 2nd and 3rd on the Bronze Group's Sword Steel. Only after Leng Ming. After Leng Ming's Sword Steel results came out, the two brothers had been looking for an opportunity to teach Ling Ming a lesson. But as soon as the competition started, they couldn't help it. What they didn't expect even more was that the other sword spirits in this competition were unexpectedly thinking the same thing as them, and they all attacked Ling Ming as soon as the competition started. Even if you're Lord Jinka's disciple, what can you do against this kind of attack? The Ice and Fire brothers sneered in their hearts. At that moment, an emerald green sword light soared into the sky. Powerful sword chi tore through the thick smoke. A boy in rattan armor expressionlessly patted the dust off his face and slowly walked out of the billowing smoke. He was completely unscathed, and there wasn't even a speck of dust on his face. This was the result of his special training after being hit by Jinka and by Qiao's mixed doubles. Ling Ming was just a blade of grass. But now, this blade of grass was very hard. Chapter 1422. The scale of the Sword Dao meet was unprecedented, and even the bronze group competition was exciting. Ling Ming was besieged at the beginning, and there were many cheers in the venue. However, to everyone's surprise, when the thick smoke dissipated, the boy in rattan armor walked out unscathed. His entire body was emitting a green light and the aura of the laws of nature. Ling Ming could no longer remember his memories of the special training, and he only knew that he had been beaten up by his master and his wife during the special training, and his sword body had been repaired after being shattered countless times. It must be because of the special training. At this moment, Ling Ming thought to himself. It was because when the attacks of the bronze group contestants landed on him, he didn't feel any pain at all. It was just like a mosquito bite. Due to the fact that Ling Ming was besieged at the beginning, all the sword spirits attacked him, and the 199 sword she gathered at one point to form a huge explosion. Ling Ming did not feel any pain or itch. However, the explosion had already caused many sword spirits to be affected. More than half of the contestants were eliminated at once. Hence, including Ling Ming, there were less than 100 sword spirits left on the field, and most of them were injured. The explosion of the bronze group sword chi was also extremely powerful. That was the terrifying thing about the sword spirits born in the Sword King realm. Even if they were bronze group sword spirits, they would still be able to achieve great things on Earth. After the first round of testing, everyone present knew very well that the final opponent this blade of grass would face was the Ice and Fire brothers in the void. The two brothers were very strong, and if they joined forces, they would have the strength to fight the Silver Group sword spirits. Twin sword spirits were very rare in the Sword King realm, and the Ice and Fire brothers had not been nurtured for too long in the Sword King realm. Given time, they might be able to be ranked in the Diamond Group. How can a blade of grass be so tough? But that's it, I was just testing it just now. In the void, the Ice and Fire brothers crossed their arms and stared at Ling Ming condescendingly. The two brothers had long predicted that Ling Ming might have received special training from the Sword King before the start of the competition, so he wouldn't be defeated so easily. However, in fact, that was exactly what the two brothers wanted. It would be boring if he was defeated too easily. The current Ling Ming had been personally trained by the Sword King. If they could defeat Ling Ming in such a situation, then the two of them would definitely become famous through this battle. He might even gain Lord Sword King's favor and appreciation. At this moment, Ling Ming looked into the void. The pressure that the Ice and Fire brothers gave him was not as great as he had imagined. The pressure on him actually came mostly from Wang Ling, Jinka, and Bai Qiao. Ling Ming was very clearly aware that these three people were watching his battle as well. Because of this, he didn't want to lose face. Just as this thought flashed through his mind, the nearby injured sword spirits that had yet to be eliminated suddenly soared into the sky again. They had a tacit understanding and actually formed a sword formation on the spot. Heavenly Sun Sword Formation. Get rid of him first, someone shouted. They formed a circle in the sky, shining like the sun. In the center of the Heavenly Sun Sword Formation, the sword chi interweaved together, constantly fusing together. Then, it gave birth to a kind of sword chi that surged with powerful energy. It only took a few seconds. A beam of golden light fell from the sky like a huge sword and struck Lang Ming's face. This fusion sword chi was very strong. If Lang Ming hadn't gone through special training, he would have collapsed on the spot. But now, things were different. The combined sword chi caused Lang Ming's rattan armor to smoke. Don't get in the way. Lang Ming didn't even bother to raise his head. He didn't care at all. With a light flick, a wisp of emerald green sword chi flowed out from between his fingers. This wisp of emerald green sword chi was very calm and didn't have the slightest murderous intent. However, when it entered the combined sword chi in the sky, it suddenly exploded with a loud bang. As a mushroom cloud rose in the air, the sword spirits that had formed the sword formation were instantly blown to pieces and scurried around the entire sword battle arena like jumping eggs. After dealing with these sword spirits, Lang Ming turned to face his two opponents. The Ice and Fire brothers were also observing the battle, and were astonished by the results of Lang Ming's special training. This increase in battle strength was indeed too rapid. Brother. At that moment, Ice Sword turned to look at Fire Man on the side. Looks like we can only cripple him. Fire Sword's thoughts coincided with Ice Sword's. They wanted to win Jinka's favor through this battle, but Lang Ming's rapid progress made them feel pressured. Even if they beat Lang Ming's talent was still there. As long as his talent was there, it was only a matter of time before he surpassed them. But if they crippled this kid in front of them in the competition, Lord Sword King might have no other choice. In the judges' seats, inside the crystal house, Yu Ling frowned slightly. She could feel that the Ice and Fire brothers were already accumulating strength. Furthermore, very strong killing intent. It looks like these two brothers have already decided to kill Lang Ming. It wasn't just Yu Ling, Mou also felt it. Lord Sword King is also watching this battle. This is to attract Lord Sword King's attention, Nine Nether said. It could only be said that as the representative of Sword King World, he instantly understood what the two brothers were thinking. These two brothers seemed to have a sure kill combination. What's it called? Mou lowered her head and pondered. It's the Ice and Fire blades, Little Qian replied. Little Qian replied, with sword chi all over their bodies, they charge at the opponent from the left and right at high speed. One uses the left leg and the other the right leg, and the two legs spin in a pincer attack, using the strength of the legs to crush the opponent's head. Hey, can the little guy handle it? Mou was worried. At the same time, the jade crown on her head changed color to a melancholy dark blue. This color-changing jade crown reflected Mou's current mood. If she wasn't emotional, it would be white. I don't think you need to worry too much. Nine Nether smiled. Although he didn't know what on earth the 2 days of special training had been about. But judging from Lang Ming's reaction in the face of the Heavenly Sun sword formation, it was likely that Jinka and Bai Qiao had already demonstrated all their combination techniques in front of Lang Ming in the last 2 days. In the next moment, the Ice and Fire brothers' combination technique, Ice and Fire blades, was already upon him. He was sure that the Ice and Fire brothers' next attack would definitely be a concentrated attack on him. Although Lang Ming couldn't remember where he had seen this scene before, he somehow felt like he had seen it before. His body reacted almost uncontrollably from muscle memory. When the brothers' ice leg and ham approached his head, he grabbed them with one hand and pinched their ankles. Lang Ming's body was light as he formed a spiral on the spot, as if he was dancing as he played with the Ice and Fire brothers in the palm of his hand. This was the kind of strength that could overcome strength with softness. After spinning for a few seconds, the Ice and Fire brothers were thrown away. When everyone came back to their senses, a Tai Chi disc had formed under Lang Ming's feet. This was a technique that used the brothers' strength to leverage on each other. Lang Ming didn't know how he had done it, but his body had moved involuntarily. After the counterattack was over, the Ice and Fire brothers were huddled together in the sword battle arena, their clothes in tatters and their faces bruised and swollen. There was fear in their eyes as they stomped their feet and retreated continuously, mumbling in a panic, who used Tai Chi. After a few seconds of silence, the entire sword battle arena burst into fiery cheers. It was true that the audience had always been fence-sitters. And this was the scariest thing about champion fans. Leng Ming heaved a long sigh of relief. He felt that he didn't embarrass his master. At this moment, in the depths of the infinite Milky Way, a layer outside the Milky Way. Through the endless stars, a pair of turbid evil eyes opened. "I've found the most suitable sacrifice." A moment later, a young voice was heard. "Sir, you finally can't hold it in anymore?" This voice came from a young man surrounded by stars. His figure was blurry, and only a faint outline could be seen under a trace of starlight. As he spoke, the surrounding stars collided and exploded. The two of them used the universe as a chessboard and the stars in their hands as chess pieces to play. "I've waited for a long time for the heaven tomb grass to take form. And now, the time is ripe." The owner of the turbid eye said calmly, "When the old Rubik's Cube is assembled, that group of people will die. People have to pay the price for their foolishness. But that young man is not easy to deal with. Even I can't see his background." The young man surrounded by stars frowned slightly. "I will fully understand him before the battle. I have already set up chess pieces in the Sword King realm." At this moment, the owner of the turbid eye said coldly. Chapter 1423. Leng Ming's victory in this battle was within expectations. Next was the showdown between the king group. Because this was the finale, there were also the showdowns between the silver, gold and diamond groups. Including the time needed to clean up the competition venue, Sun Yinger estimated that it would take at least 2 to 3 hours for Lotus Sun to go on stage. Since she was bored, of course she had to have some fun. Sun Yinger's eyes darted around as she thought of a good way to tease Lotus Sunday. "Rong, I don't know if you've sensed it," she said cautiously in Lotus Sun's ear. Her face burned and she got goosebumps all over. What are you doing, You haven't noticed yet?" Sun Yinger whispered in her ear. "Ling Zhenren is in Sky Room 2 next door." In fact, Sun Yinger hadn't actually sensed Wang Ling's aura at all. But she could sense Wang Ying. It wasn't that Wang Ying had leaked her aura. It was just that after being trained by Wang Ying for a long time, Sun Yinger had developed a habitual muscle reflex. This was because Wang Ying, the gorilla, often grabbed her wrist and banged it against the wall. As a result, Sun Yinger's wrist was now like a radar device used to detect Wang Ying's movements. As long as she was close to Wang Ying, her wrist would feel like it was being clamped down. Furthermore, the closer he was, the stronger the feeling of his wrist being bound became. During the showdown between the bronze group, Sun Yinger walked back and forth in the room tentatively, and finally found the source of the signal. She confirmed that Wang Ying was next door. Since Wang Ying was next door, it was obvious that Wang Ling was here as well. "Classmate Wang Ling is here too?" After hearing this news, a look of pleasant surprise appeared on Lotus Sun's face. She knew very well that given Wang Ling's personality, there was a high chance that he would choose to watch the match from home. But he had actually come to watch the match live. For her, this was definitely an extra surprise. She didn't know why, but the young girl suddenly felt that her mood was very good. Her previous nervousness was instantly swept away, and she didn't feel nervous at all. Wang Ling's presence, she felt very at ease. "Rong, aren't you going to greet them next door?" Sun Yinger chuckled and began to encourage the girl to take action. I haven't thought of what to say yet." Lotus Sun blushed and started to heat up again. "Besides, classmate Wang Ling is clearly next door. If he doesn't come over, it's because he doesn't want to interfere with my competition, right? If I go, will I disturb him?" "It's okay. Just tell me what you want to say. I can help you pass the message. There's no need to go there." Sun Yinger's expression was somewhat treacherous. The human mouthpiece, activate. Is this okay?" After saying that, Lotus Sun glanced at Wu Jin and Old Barbarian. They were watching the competition in Lotus Sun's heavenly room. It wasn't that he was purposely refusing to leave. In fact, it was Nine Nether who had asked them to stay here. On one hand, he could better commentate on the match, and on the other, he could act as her bodyguard. It had to be said that both Wu Jin and Old Barbarian were sensible people. When they heard Lotus Sun's words, they consciously covered their ears with their hands. Do not listen to indecent things. They would not meddle in the affairs of the young couple. Besides, it was no good for them to know too much. Apart from that, Wu Jin and Old Barbarian also felt that this was the best way to prevent the dog food from exploding. Lotus Sun hesitated for a moment, then turned to Sun Yinger and said, "Then, just help me say hello." "No. That's too simple. Don't you have anything in particular you want to ask?" Sun Yinger rubbed her chin and said, "For example, the Rubik's Cube task." "Rongrong, didn't you say before that you were worried that something bad would happen if the collection process went too smoothly?" "That's right, but I can't tell what's wrong, it's just a sixth sense." The girl looked troubled. "Also, classmate Wang Ling won't feel comfortable asking too many questions at once. Then ask a simple question. For example, what do you think of Jiang Yingying? It's best if you can write an essay of at least 800 words. What are you thinking about, Ying-er?" Lotus Sun smiled bitterly. Lotus Sun smiled bitterly. Classmate Wang Ling probably only knows 6 points in his essay. "That's true." Sun Yinger nodded. "Then how about this, help me say hello first, and then help me ask classmate Wang Ling. I want to invite him to Old Street this weekend and ask him if he's free." Lotus Sun mustered up her courage and said to Sun Yinger. Sometimes, opportunities were in one's own hands. She had to take the initiative. "Okay." Sun Yinger nodded. Lotus Sun added, "Tell classmate Wang Ling that it's just the two of us. It won't be like the last time when we went to the Shao family compound, with a bunch of people following us." The main thing was that Lotus Sun didn't need to worry about her safety now. If they ran into a killer organization like Shadow Stream that had been hired by a competitor of Huagua Water Curtain Group, she could handle it on her own. No problem. Then, Sun Yinger agreed and turned into a shadow, slipping out. But the truth was that she didn't dare enter Wang Ling's room. She just pretended to pace back and forth at the door, and then made up an answer. Sun Yinger quickly returned to Lotus Sun's side. "Ah. I asked him. Ling Jinren said he can go. He's free." "Really?" Lotus Sun's eyes lit up. Sun Yinger had never seen the girl so happy, and for a moment, she suddenly felt a little guilty. Really, no, Ying-er. Didn't you ask at all?" Fortunately, Lotus Sun quickly noticed that something wasn't right with Sun Yinger's expression. In any case, this wasn't the first time this girl had been naughty. Given her understanding of Sun Yinger, it was very likely that Sun Yinger had made up an answer herself. If she had really asked, how could she have come back so quickly? Lotus Sun stroked Sun Yinger's head with a very gentle expression on her face. "Ying-er, since you asked, ask nicely. I won't blame you." Sun Yinger was silent for a while, then pursed her lips and said weakly, "Then I'll really go. If I'm turned down, don't blame me." I won't blame you." Lotus Sun nodded. "Okay." Sun Yinger realized that she had only wanted to tease Lotus Sun, but now it seemed that she had trapped herself. This was a hole she had dug herself, and even if she had to hold back her tears, she had to jump in. She was so nervous that she paced back and forth in front of Sky Number 2. The feeling of her wrists being bound grew stronger. After struggling for a few minutes, Sun Yinger gritted her teeth. "Forget it. For Rongrong's happiness, I'll throw caution to the wind." She was just about to turn into a shadow and enter the room. The next moment, she was lifted up by a force. When Sun Yinger came back to her senses, she saw Wang Ying grab her wrist and push her against the wooden wall of the inn. "What do you want now?" Wang Ying looked at her with a slightly playful expression. "Lord Ling is watching the competition, no one is allowed to disturb him." Sun Yinger's eyes glistened with tears. I just wanted to ask, you're not allowed. Wang Ying coldly said these 2 words. Sun Yinger was annoyed. Why do you have to control me wherever you go? What if I had to ask? I said, you're not allowed. Wang Ying still maintained her attitude. Then I'll shout. Ling Zhenren will definitely hear me. Sun Yinger resisted with renewed vigor. You can try. Wang Ying sneered. I'll try. Sun Yinger snorted. She was about to speak. But in the next moment, she suddenly felt that Wang Ying's breath was suddenly closing in on her, using 2 domineering lips to swiftly seal her mouth. You're tuning into the Journey of the Soul YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.